So
Let's do it. We are rolling. Good. What time is it? Morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, it sure is. I've never done an early episode before. My name is Justin Collins, and I am one half of the duo who runs the podcast known as Across the Aisle. My partner, Chaz Case, could not be here today. If you're wondering why the guy to my right is looking way more attractive than usual, that's because that's not Chaz.
so it begins.
Yeah, so Chaz has been MIA for a few weeks, and so I decided, it's been a little while since we've done an episode, and there's a lot of things to talk about. So I figured I would call basically the man who inspired me to get involved into politics and try to figure out what the hell's actually going on through many debates of our own. Man that I love and respect. He is my uncle, Dan Olds. Dan, welcome to the show.
Hola, senor. Good to be here. Never expected to be here.
Yeah, you know what? Me neither. But I don't know. I was sitting there one night. I was like, man, we haven't done an episode in a little over a month now. And it's just like, if I were to do it with somebody else, even if it's just a one-off, who do I think would fit? And I mean, like I said, through many, many, many arguments over Facebook that we've had, I thought, you know what? I bet you would really get a kick out of this.
He would. I was surprised to hear from you, and I thought, well, if there's anyone that I'm gonna give a hard time to, face to face, because we don't see each other face to face that often since we live in completely different states. But
yep.
It's and no one else, and it does. I also figured if we were to do this, sort of in a family crowd or in a crowd, everybody else would get up and leave. So it's nice that it's, we're able to do this, because I would always want to bat you about a little bit. So.
Of course. And, as the downfall on Facebook comments back and forth, you tend to have your brigade of people who like to try to.
I know. And I said this to Jaron the other day. I said, I got to hand it to Justin, because honestly, he wades into this war every time knowing exactly what he's getting into, and he does it anyway. And yeah, you battle people that are way harsher on you than I probably would ever be. And there are times I've actually gone in and said, yeah, okay, we're getting rid of this. This is, you can't talk to my nephew that way. That's not happening. So.
And that's what it's all about. I mean, you and I have been arguing for, I don't know, the better part of 20 years, not always politics, but basically anything we could think of. You're on a side, I'm on a side. And just.
That's very true.
Gotta say, you're hands down one of my favorite people in the world. And I've always respected and, admired you. And so I'm actually really excited to do this.
And likewise too. I would rather do this with somebody else, because at least I know that you're going to hear me and you're going to disagree with me. So, yeah. But I at least feel heard. I'm fine with being disagreed with, but I if you're heard, then the rest of it is it's all okay.
Agreed.
Then you come with a certain amount of knowledge that's refreshing too, because a lot of times you just hear junk.
Yeah. Yeah, and sometimes we get caught up more in our comebacks than actually absorbing what was brought at us.
That's also true.
But we are going to try our best today, and we are going to, in the spirit of what we try to do here at Across the Aisle, promote civil discourse. You're free to say what you want, believe what you want, and I'm free to say and believe what I want. And at the end of the day, sometimes a moment of clarity is a little more valuable than a moment of compromise, where at least I see where you're coming from. And that's okay. Like, I don't need any further explanation. This is where you come from. This is why you think that. Okay, fine. The logistics of it all, can flip back or forth, but it all depends on where you're getting your information. And we all tend to look for things that confirm our views more than we confirm our views based on what we see.
That I agree with.
Yeah. So, Dan, little history about you. You are a pretty much lifelong Democrat, yes?
Yeah, I think when I was 18, I voted for the first time. I voted for Ronald Reagan, but that's because my dad did. So.
Yeah. So, in true form with the podcast, Dan's going to represent the left side of the view, and I'm going to represent the right side of the view, and we're going to just go ahead and dive right in. So the first topic I wanted to bring up with you, Joe Biden is obviously the president of the United States. He has been for a little over 2 months now. I was just curious, just to start off, what were your hopes, or aspirations of a Biden presidency going into it, even throughout the election? Was he your first choice? And moving past that, how do you think he's holding up to your expectations as of now?
Well, no, he was not my first choice. 12 years ago, when he was running against Barack, he was my first choice, but he was axed out pretty early on. So I appreciate I appreciate Ted, his foreign policy back then. So, so no, he was not my first choice. What I expected and wanted from his presidency, which I think is bigger than the man, but from his presidency, from his administration, is a return to civil discourse, a return to listening instead of just automatically out of the gate arguing about whatever it is, and not the level of lying that we've seen in the last 4 years. I mean, there's not a politician out there, I believe, who doesn't lie, and it can be from saying, it can be lies of omission. Well, I say this part of it is true, but the other 5 things aren't. So you just say the part that is true and ignore the other. You know what I mean? That can really affect any issue. So,
sure.
So yeah, I've been happy about those things. I basically believe him. I basically think he's doing an okay job. He's overturned a lot of things that I think have sort of led to making the divide larger than it needed to be. And I think he's doing what he can to close it up, although it's probably too late, but nonetheless. So yeah, I'm okay. I'm pretty happy with what he's done and the way he's going so far.
Yeah. What are some of the, or even one of the things that he's reversed that you thought was detrimental, and then when he reversed it, it's like, okay, good, thank God that's gone? Like, do you have any specific in mind?
I'm trying to think of specific things. It's more what he's done, and it's more his sort of demeanor and the way he speaks, and you know what I mean. I think his reaction to COVID has been positive. I think just admitting that it's a thing and it's real, and masks help, and social distancing helps, and all of these things, rather than just pretending that they don't have any place in the discussion or turning them into some sort of political, ball game, to me is baffling. And so, yeah. But I don't think that there's been an executive order that he's passed saying, and there may be, I mean, I don't know, maybe he's made PPE and things like that some sort of political,
yeah.
Well, I don't know.
Well, I guess we can go ahead and, it's early enough to kick it off. I disagree in the sense that he tried to make COVID not such a political thing anymore. I mean, during the campaign, it was him who was saying 400,000 people are dead, and that's because of Donald Trump. It's like, that's about as political a statement as you can make. I mean, we're now up to, I think, 545,000 deaths now. Yeah. So are the 145 additional now Biden's fault, or is it like the general presidential rule? I'm just carrying over what they brought in, kind of thing, or where's the line there?
First of all, I don't think that he didn't blame Donald Trump for the disease. He didn't blame Donald Trump for the virus. He blamed Donald Trump because here's what I think about this. I think what happened is Trump made a calculated decision to minimize the pandemic, so much so because he thought politically, if he just ignored the pandemic and got everybody else to pretend that it wasn't there, then he would get reelected. The problem is that was a really bad political election strategy that he had there. Just like Hillary, when she was running against Donald Trump, made the massive mistake of not going to Wisconsin, assuming that she had stuff in the bag that she didn't have. Just assuming that because she is a Democrat and you are too, you're just going to roll with me. So I think he just I think Trump just miscalculated. And in miscalculating, what he did was downplay something that was costing more lives than it needed to cost. Were people going to die? Absolutely. Was there any way around it? No. Did he get this vaccine in a year? Yeah, I give him credit for that. I absolutely do.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's respectable to say, especially considering, like, you know, Biden's biggest goal in the campaign was, I'm gonna have 100 million vaccines in 100 days or whatever it was. So that's essentially 1 million a day. But like the weekend before he became president, we were already administering 1 million a day. Then he comes in and he's like,
I
you
don't know
guys
about
said that
that,
goal was impossible. No, that's true. I mean, you can look that up. He's like, you guys said that was impossible and I've already done it. It's like, well, it technically happened just a few days before you even got in office. So now you're basically saying your goal is to just plateau and keep it at 1 million a day, and then you're going to claim victory. It's just like, I think that's a little dishonest. But you know, it is the name of the game. You take your wins and you put the notch on your bedpost or whatever you want to call it. And yeah, that one's mine. I take that. But
you take a victory lap where you take your victory lap where and when you can, whether it's entirely you, because that's absurd. I mean, there was no vaccine, and the vaccine was being administered before the end of 2020, and you know, he didn't have anything to do with that. He had nothing to do with that, and now he has absolutely been claiming that the infrastructure for getting the vaccine out was not there, not in the way that they said it was. And I can remember watching a 60 Minutes with the military guy, Priya, or whatever his name is. I can't remember his name. And he said, all I have to do is say execute, and then it's going to roll out, and we're all going to have a vaccine, and you know, blah blah blah. And it's like, okay, that's completely false. But you know, politicians are still politicians, and Biden is a politician.
Textbook, yeah, 100%. And that was obviously, I think, the biggest draw to Donald Trump, you know, 4 or 5 years ago, was that he wasn't that. And there's a large swath of people in this country that were sick of the same old, like, yeah, I got you. Like, we're going to do that. And then 4 years go by and it's like, weren't we going to do, like, I mean, we're already, like I said, 60 days into it, and Biden was going to give us all $2,000, and it was only $1,400. Not to say I'm not grateful, but you know, $2,000, $1,400, not the same. We're going to raise minimum wage, and then we find out that's a little more difficult than just saying that we're going to stop putting kids in cages, and yet.
Well, you know, you're making a lot of really broad statements here that aren't, you know, again, you're sort of omitting some stuff. Before he said $1,400 because in the fall, the Republicans passed $600, and Trump came out and said, no, there should be 2,000. So Biden just amped up and said, yes. So now here's your now you're whole. So if that's
the sales. I mean, that's in the fine print, sure. I mean, yeah, when you do the math, 600 plus 1,400 equals 2,000.
What did you think it was? Did you think it was? Did you think
that's not what he said. He said, I am going to make sure everyone gets $2,000, not in addition to the 600 you just got, an additional $2,000. That's how it was pitched. Again, you can look in the fine print, and maybe that's what he omitted or whatever. But it was. I mean, it's, you know, it's splitting hairs really. But there was a funny tweet someone put out that was like, it was right after Biden launched missiles into Syria, and they were like, man, those are pretty expensive missiles for a guy who owes me $2,000.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, I only ever thought that well, at first I thought it was 2. Yeah. And then I thought, no. Because so I was really fine with that, because then it's like, well, you're making up, you're doing the 2. But I didn't think that was in the fine print. That to me seemed like a logical conclusion. I made the logical conclusion that that's what that was all about. So, and as far as keeping kids in cages, you know, Trump has spent the last 4 years separating families, keeping them in Mexico, and keep putting kids in cages and all that stuff. So the infrastructure is now gone, and well, it has to be rebuilt. And yes, there is an influx because people are like, ooh, okay, we can get back in again because Trump's not there. So now there's a shot that we can get in. And don't let me start on immigration. I think the problem with the southern border has very little to do with the people who are coming across. I think there's no such thing as a crisis because 10,000 people are coming to the United States. That's not a crisis. We're a country of almost 350 million people. 10,000 is like a I mean, what, are you kidding me?
Well, I think where the phrase crisis comes in isn't necessarily the volume of people who are coming in, but it's like you can't have your school operating at full capacity because we're in a pandemic, and yet you can have a holding facility meant to hold 260 people, and yet you've got 400 people crammed in there. So it's like, are we vetting these people? Are we testing these people? Why is this not a crisis if opening a school is a crisis, or opening a movie theater at full capacity, or restaurants or whatever? Why exactly under this guise is this okay?
Well, first of all, I've never heard anyone, including Kamala Harris yesterday morning on the news, say that it's okay. I've not heard one of them say it's okay. I've heard the Secretary of Homeland, I can't remember all these people's names.
We're not experts here. That's not what we're doing.
I've heard him specifically say, don't come, stop coming. And I heard him say that a week and a half ago. And also, this is not something that is being controlled by the administration any more than gas prices, which drives me insane, aren't being controlled by the administration. That these people are coming across the border, whether he says stop or not, whether there's enough room for them or not, whether all these different things. So this is not a crisis of his making or of anyone's making. This is happening because these people are running from death and despair in their countries. So
sure, and I think that's fair, but I think the difference is the way it's portrayed in the mainstream media today, as opposed to just a year ago or 4 years ago, where it was a crisis. We were calling it a crisis. How is Trump keeping kids in cages and separating them from their families when all he was doing was using policies put in place by Barack Obama 8 years before? And 8 years ago or 12 years ago, nobody was saying anything. But then the first set of pictures came out when Trump was president. It's like, look how awful this is. And it's like, wait, what is that? No, that picture's from 2014. He wasn't even there.
The thing, I would agree with you. I would agree with you to a certain extent. The reason it was called a crisis, the reason it was called a mass, is because that's what Trump labeled it. Trump is, this is the thing that killed me about him. He would come out and say, this is a mass crisis. And then the news reports would say, well, it's a crisis. And he'd go up and say, why are you calling it a crisis? It's like,
well, I think he was calling the immigration a crisis. They were calling the kids in cages a crisis.
No, because there was 2,000, 4,000 people coming. We watched them walk from Guatemala to Texas. Yeah, I mean, that's what he was talking about. And he had the National Guard down there, and I mean, it's they're women and children. He's got the National Guard with. It's like he turns.
Well, they're not all women and children. I mean, there is definitely room for.
99% of them are. Yes. Are there bad?
87% of statistics are made up on the spot. So that may be true.
I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that probably in this conversation.
Yeah, I'll throw a stat at you, and you can just hit me right back with it. That's fine. But I think, like I said, kids in cages sucks. It's a horrible just place to end up in this situation, obviously. But nobody who's up in arms against this is really putting forth any real solution other than, we'll just let them in. And it's just like, well, that's not a viable solution.
What do you do? What do you do?
That's exactly it. I don't know. Thank God I'm not in charge of this decision. But if the rule is, if a family crosses the border, the adults in the family have just broken the law. If they've crossed not through a port of entry or claimed asylum or whatever, they have broken the law. Kids don't get to go to jail with their parents in any scenario. If I go out and, rob a bank, my non-existent child wouldn't be able to go to prison. He would then be separated from his father. So when you take that into account, it's like, okay, so we can't hold the children in prison, but the adults broke the law. So what is the solution? I mean, it's not like you can just take the whole family and say, all right, well, just come on in and we'll find you, sometime later for court, and we'll suss this all out, in a few years, because they're not going to come back. Why would they come back? I mean,
I hear you. I think that's why kids are coming over now rather than families, because I think also I've been witness to none of this, obviously, but I've seen reports where families are being sent back. I've also seen reports where they are testing kids for COVID. And I've also, they're doing whatever they can for background checks. I think what's going to happen now that Kamala has sort of taken up the mantle on this, is HHS is going to play a much larger role rather than border security. They're in these
Sure.
little tiny structures and they're crammed in there because that's what Border Patrol has. Those are the
Sure.
resources they have.
Sure.
The HHS resources, which are the pictures that we saw this morning, which it looks
Mhm.
like, it looks like Club Med.
Does not look good.
Well, it looks better than they are standing in the Border Patrol things. And I found out that those were all taken at an HHS facility, which does have playgrounds for children, and it does have places for them to sleep and rooms and so on and so forth. So yeah, I mean, it's a different situation, but the thing is they're coming whether you like it or not, and they're kids. And so
Yeah.
what do? You can't, I mean, 6'10".
Well, I think it's I think it's a horrible situation that parents are essentially forced to send their kids on their own, because they know if the kids are caught on their own, at least they'll stay there
Exactly.
for the time being. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And I absolutely, that breaks my heart that there are people who are just trying to just make a better life for themselves, and this is the only way we can do it, even if we're apart for however long. This is the way to go. But then, with all rules and systems regularly, there's people who take advantage. There's coyotes who show up with kids, and it's like, well, these are my kids, and they're just like, and it's just like,
Absolutely.
now is it an overwhelming majority? Obviously not. Probably not. I wouldn't even say half of them. I don't know, but I'm just shot in the dark. But it is still a thing, and it is still a concern. So when you're taking that into account, the kids are on their own, and you can't just turn them around and send them on their merry way. What are the options? I mean, other than holding them and trying to find, I don't know, a relative in the States or foster home, I don't know. But it's definitely, the problem is, it's number one, it's the lack of transparency we've had thus far with this administration. I mean, and Jen Psaki can come out all day and say, well, I'm going to direct you to HHS and maybe they can give you a clear answer. It's like, but they work for you. So if these people are saying they're not allowed to let the press in, or they're not allowed to do ride-alongs, and you just refer it back to them, it's like, couldn't you just come out and say, President Biden, let the press in, do the ride-along. You work for me, so I'm setting the rules, just do it. But I think involuntarily not only not doing it, but also kind of avoiding it altogether, it adds a layer. I mean, the whole thing coming in was, we're going to be the party of transparency. And then it's been, 62 days, and we're just now seeing what's going on in the facility. And it's,
yeah,
I mean, I find that frustrating.
It is frustrating. I agree. And I don't disagree. Well, I've seen pictures, actually. I'm just starting to. I think that justifiably, this sort of grew on Biden, and I don't think it's been 2 months. I think it's maybe been a month. But nonetheless, that's a distinction without a difference. It doesn't really matter.
Sure.
But I think that this has caught them by surprise. I think Biden's entire existence, his entire presidency, his everything is hinging upon getting everyone a shot in the arm. That's what he said going in. That's what he's doing. That's what he's focusing on. So now he's like saying, okay, Kamala, this is another thing. It's not going anywhere. It's getting worse instead of better. You figure out to take care of it. And you know what? You don't know what to do, and I don't know what to do, but I have complete faith that people in government at HHS and so on and so forth do know what to do. They're the ones who write the policy. They're the ones who enforce the policy. They're the ones who figure out, that's their job, to figure these things out.
Yeah.
I'm a graphic designer. If you want an ad, I can tell you how to do it. But if you don't know how to make an ad, don't worry about it. I got you. So that's what these people are supposed to be doing, I think, and I hope. And I think hopefully now that, it's being taken seriously from the top of the White House, something will change.
I think a huge part of, basically everything politics is the optics of it, right? So it's like, what we the people see is essentially the reality, and without anyone coming out to clarify, then that's what we have to work with. So do you think it's coincidence that President Biden put Kamala Harris in charge like a day or two after they asked her if she was going to visit the border, and she did that cackle she does? She's like, not today.
Yeah.
Or do you think that was a direct correlation? Like, look, Kamala, you got to come out on top of this one, because that was a bad look.
Well, as far as the look is concerned, those things happen, and in 2 days you don't remember the look anymore. So I don't know if it was just a look, but certainly, um, uh, uh, optically it was looking bad and getting worse. So he needed to figure out a way to take this seriously and not even give it to the HHS, and not even give it to the Homeland Secretary. You know what I mean? He needed to step into this and step on this in a big way so that we're all going, okay, he's going to do something about it. And and I thought it made sense that he put her in charge of this. This is something that she can hang her hat on if it goes well. It's something that she can, sweep under the carpet if it doesn't. I mean, politically, it's probably a smart move on his part.
Yeah, I agree. I like I said, I just think it was, she was flying to Jacksonville and she was like, Florida, help is on the way. And it's like, I don't know if you know this, Florida's doing fantastic right now. We've been open for damn near a year. The economy's solid, we're profitable. People are just flocking here. And when they ask you about the border, you do that Joker laugh she does, which just, I can't, like, it's always like an awkward, like, I don't have a real answer, so I'm just gonna laugh my ass off kind of thing. And then she flies to Jacksonville and says, help is on the way. It's like, we don't need the help. The border needs the help. Go there. We're good. You're not going to come march around here saying, look what we did. It's like, no. Ron DeSantis did this. So again, optically, politically, I don't know. I think it lacked. I think it was disingenuous. I think it was, I don't know, them trying, again, another example of trying to take credit that isn't yours. Because like I said, we didn't get, I mean, we get the checks, sure, but beyond that, I don't know how much of a role the federal government had in Florida's, path towards recovery or getting out of this whole thing. So I don't know. That's where I stand on that.
But I don't know what happened in Florida either. I do know that a lot of the stuff that is being, that's being reported as far as the whole pandemic thing and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's worse. It's worse than Florida was willing to admit, for sure. That much I know. What has happened, however, is that Florida seems to be getting a lot of the vaccine more quickly. And DeSantis, what he did, in my opinion, and again, I'm not there, I don't see it every day. I didn't see Kamala Harris laugh this off, so I can't really speak to that because I didn't see it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not disputing it. I'm just saying I didn't see it, so I don't know.
Okay.
If she did it in a vindictive way or a
sure
way, I don't know. But what DeSantis did was he made a calculated bet as well, and he won.
Mm-hmm.
He won it
mm-hmm.
because the perception, certainly by all of you guys, and although I have many friends who live in South Florida who don't share your optimism,
sure,
and your positive outlook on it. So it's not everyone I know who lives in Florida, but it's certainly all of you guys are like, we're done, we're good, we don't care, we're not wearing masks, we're not this, we're not that. And it's like,
well, we do still wear masks. We definitely do still wear masks. I mean, and it's not even a mandate, but there's I have to work with a mask in a kitchen all day. Can't take it off. You can come into a restaurant, you have to wear a mask, but as soon as you sit down, it's just like, boop, and it's like I've literally walked out to my dining room and see just the entire dining room full, every single table, every bar stool full, no masks. And I'm sitting here with my mask on going, is this really any safer than just not? You know what I mean? Like, it's so arbitrary. And it's like to have to take it that seriously as I'm looking in a room full of people yelling over each other and eating. And it's just like, I don't know. I put the mask on to make you or anyone else feel comfortable. But I personally, with all the information we've had, all the data available to us, I believe if I haven't already had it, I know I was super sick like late December and it didn't feel like a flu, but it was kind of before it was really the pandemic. So maybe I had it, maybe I don't, but I feel like if I did, I would be ultimately fine. But still, I wear the mask as a courtesy because I don't need anyone, trying to shun me out of a Publix or something like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt me to wear it, I guess is the point. So I do, but it's not and that's the biggest problem, I think, with how well Florida's actually doing compared to what the rest of the country hears that we're doing. Our numbers, when you take population into account, they're no worse than, they're actually far better than, New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, California. We rank basically middle of the pack in almost every statistic. We're the oldest state in the country, for one. Not oldest as in Florida's existed longest, but population. I think 25% of our population is over 65, which you would think would be just a mass, just complete crushing of our population, but we're doing so much better than New York and New Jersey, and like I said, all the states that I mentioned in those numbers. So yeah, you hear the case numbers rise and rise and rise, but the hospitals aren't being overrun. The death toll, it's still going, but it's no worse than it's definitely no worse than it was, 6 to 8 months ago.
Well, you guys have had plenty of spikes. You've had plenty of, and you don't know that the hospitals aren't. I don't know hospitals are overrun right now, but there was a time when your hospitals were overrun, and DeSantis was saying no, they're not. And then you go and you'd see reporters walk through the hospitals with people, in the hallways, or not be able to get out of the ICU because there were no bed. So it's like,
yeah, but that wasn't something unique to us either. That
I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying that you're painting a really rosy picture, and I've not been there in a year, so I can't.
I'm not saying
you're wrong.
I'm not saying the entire time has been rosy. I'm saying where we stand today is far better than any state who has taken extreme lockdown measures.
Well, where everyone is standing today is far better than it was 6 months ago, because the vaccine is, a tenth of the population is or more than that now is vaccinated, and everything is opening back up again, and on and on and on. So everyone's better off now. But
what I'm saying is
Thanksgiving,
everyone is better, yes, but we didn't have to sacrifice 6-8 months of lockdown to get there. And even the ones that do, California, New York, New Jersey, are still having a lot of trouble with it. Whereas we have more cases coming. People are still dying, sure, but kids are going to school. Businesses are functioning. People are allowed to go to work, and we have essentially the same results. So it's like, how much?
I don't know if I believe you. First of all, Miami is the closest thing to a city that you guys have in Florida. It's the only thing that even approaches something like LA or New York or DC or Chicago or any of those places. It's the only one that even approaches that. You have millions of people living on top of one another. You can't treat it the same way as you can in Miami, when everyone's outside all the time, 12 months out of the year. The population is far more spread out than it is than it is even in New Jersey, than it is even in Baltimore, DC, than it even, and that all makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference. In the summertime, everyone was out and about. We would go to the park and have, picnics with friends who sat over there, but it was outside. So it was so different. But then when you get to Thanksgiving, and Florida's numbers spiked just as much, if not more, than everybody else's did. So you can't, I think this is sort of a push-pull kind of thing. I don't know enough of the actual numbers of Florida to say you guys screwed it up and we didn't screw it up. Or I don't know if we screwed up. I don't know anything. This whole thing is a real fly by the seat of your pants. People handle it differently.
Well, I know we hosted the Super Bowl just a little over a month ago. And I believe last I saw, there were only 50 reported cases of people who caught coronavirus after attending the Super Bowl.
Yeah, but there were 10,000 people who sat in a stadium built for 60,000 people. So they were pretty well spread out, and it was outside. So,
really wasn't. And especially when you take into account the huge just parade and it wasn't rioting by any means, but there was a lot of people outside after the fact, just all over each other, yelling and spitting and all of that.
Yep.
So, like I said, I'm not saying at all Florida's got it beat and everyone should do what we're doing, and that's the thing from the beginning of this. And I know there was a lot of people calling, well, Trump needs to put out a federal mandate across the board. It's like, well, you can't have the same process for every state. If you took the numbers between, say, Utah and New York, and you flipped them. You think New York's going to shut down anything because of how bad Utah is doing? Of course not. No,
Of course not. Of course not.
Right.
Of course
But
not.
you know, when
and as far as what Trump didn't need to do was make wearing a mask make you a communist because you're wearing a mask, or make you, weak because you're wearing a mask. That's what he
Agreed.
didn't need to do. And he
Agreed.
spent 6 months, his last 6 months in office doing exactly that, making it some kind of a taunting people. 6,000 people join, and this was when it's starting to get cold and no one's wearing masks, and that's, please, you're just a bunch of babies if you wear masks.
Yeah.
What kind of leader does that? I mean, that's absurd.
I agree. But I think, I'm sure there is a swath of people who put a lot of stock into what he says, especially those who voted for him.
Oh my gosh, yes, 71 million of you.
Well, see, what I was going to say is I think there's a much larger number who don't hang on his every word and wait for him to tell us what to do, myself included. I didn't need Trump to tell me to wear a mask. I just did it. And even when, you had Dr. Fauci coming out and saying, oh, there's no reason for anyone to be wearing a mask right now. It's not doing anything. And then he comes out and says, well, maybe you should have, except I thought the healthcare people needed it more. So I kind of, he in his own way downplayed it in the same way that Trump's being accused of. And then he comes back and he says, well, maybe we should wear 2 masks because, if one is safe, then 2 is probably safe. And then he comes back and he says, no, there's no reason to wear 2 masks. That doesn't make any sense. There's no data to prove that. And it's like, I feel like much more people hang on the words of Fauci in this scenario than they did Trump. And yet Fauci was the one constantly flip-flopping and talking out of both sides of his mouth.
That's so not true.
That's so true.
He started in the very beginning when this thing first started. Fauci said, no, there's no reason to wear a mask. And then as the science changed, as they learned more about it, just like they have a vaccine a year later, but they didn't have one a year before, as the science changed, he changed and said, okay, the more we learn about this, then now wear masks. And once he said wear masks permanently, which was, I think, the end of March last year, he never flip-flopped on that. He never said, oh, never mind, don't wear a mask.
He didn't like, no.
You don't need to wear a mask. It's probably not going to matter. And then he realized the science showed, yes, it will matter. This is airborne. So wear a mask. And that was the end of it. You can't make it sound like he spent a year flip-flopping, because he did.
No. Hold on. No. That's not what I'm saying. He admitted to knowing when he said not to wear a mask, that mask probably would have been helpful, except he didn't want us to run out of masks for the people in the healthcare industry. He admitted that. So
I've never heard that, but I guess I'll take your word for it. I've never heard
He admitted it. And then no, he hasn't flip-flopped on wearing a mask. No, but he has flip-flopped on, wear a mask. No, wearing 2 masks wouldn't do anything. There's no data to suggest that. And then now he's walking around wearing 2 masks. And then, confusing enough, he's vaccinated and he's still wearing 2 masks.
Well, that's because people believe, your leaders, the people who are leading the cause, who are leading the charge here, people don't do as it's like the classic, don't do as I do as I say. Well, no, he's doing as he's saying, I'm going to do it, and so you should do it too. He doesn't even need to, but he said yes. And the 2 mask thing only started when the variants started to come out here after they were in the UK. And they said, because of this, that will make it better. That will help with these variants. So you can't say half the story, Justin. That's not fair.
No, I'm not saying half the story. But what I'm saying is, if the goal is to, number 1, get through this pandemic, and number 2, get everyone vaccinated, if you got vaccinated, why wouldn't you take the mask off and be like, look, you can do this too. Just get 2 shots in your arm in the span of a month, and you can do this too. We can all do this.
You know why? Because the data it's simple. It's simple because the data is not in yet as to whether you can still give it to somebody else. You're immune to it,
but it doesn't mean
that you can still get it and give it to somebody else.
No, it most certainly isn't. Johns Hopkins University has found out that those vaccinated have a 97, 98 complete safety rate, as in they're not spreading the virus, they're not recatching the virus. Israel did a whole nother study. I think their numbers were between 92 and 95%. So widely speaking, yes, the vaccine works. Yes, the vaccine not only stops the spread, but also stops you from catching it again. And also, if you have it when you get the vaccine, it lessens the symptoms. There's plenty of data to suggest that.
Not that I've heard. And Israel doesn't count because their entire population is vaccinated. So of course they're not giving it to one another. They're all vaccinated from it. So that's a that doesn't really support your argument. As far as I heard Fauci on the news this week, I think, and he said the data is not clear yet. We think it lessens. We think it's less of a chance. It looks like it's less of a chance, but the data is not in just yet. Now, it could, if it came out today or yesterday, then I'll say to you, okay, I'll go look it up too, and I'll see as well.
Yeah,
because it's out.
Look up the study from Johns Hopkins University. I can't remember the doctor's name off the top of my head, but I'm sure if you just look up vaccine efficacy, Johns Hopkins University, I'm sure something will come up. But they have what appears to be plenty of data. And again, maybe this is a case of finding something to confirm my belief instead of making my belief based on what I found. Possibly, but I don't think Johns Hopkins University is like a super right-wing like propagandist trying to, thwart anything that President Biden's administration is trying to accomplish. I believe
I agree.
As neutral, if not maybe even a little leaning towards the left as a source could possibly get, while still being reputable and believable, and not just, oh well, that's just Fox News or that's just CNN or whatever. Like, this is Johns Hopkins University. Like, this is a major medical institution. So if they're coming out and saying this, and even the CDC or WHO, I can't remember which one, even they're saying that, yeah, once you're vaccinated, you should be able to, come back to some sense of normalcy to the life you had prior to the pandemic.
I completely
But
agree
Fauci
with that.
comes out and he says, well, I'm wearing 2 masks because we're not sure about the variants. And it's like, I believe there was also a study done in South Africa where they have the South African variant, and even they are saying the vaccine is doing well against that. So there's a lot of information out there, but I think the problem is when we put one face to the problem in Dr. Fauci, it's not only limiting the amount of information you get, but it's basically telling you that all this other information doesn't matter because God King Fauci said it is so. If he says to wear 2 masks,
crazy. You're being crazy. You know what
I mean, if you're going to put that much stock into what President Trump says, why wouldn't there be at least that much stock into what the vaulted Dr. Fauci says?
I completely agree with you. Oh, I completely agree with you there. I totally agree with you there. Fauci's not the only source that I listen to. Fauci's not the only source that anyone should listen to. He's
right.
A big one for sure.
Right.
But what I'm hearing more and more is it's getting better. We're moving in the right direction. More and more people are vaccinated. The vaccination does help with in all kinds of things, including transmission, except the data's not in just yet. So rather than jump the gun, I would just let's just hold on because they're leading a nation of 350 million people. Not all of us are as smart as you and I are. So, you gotta sort of get with the lowest common denominator in some instances, especially when we're talking about people's lives.
Sure, but my issue is when we're from the beginning of this, first it was just 15 days to slow the spread, right? And it's like, okay, 15 days to slow the spread. And then somehow it morphed into, 45 days to completely stop the transmission. And it's like, well, hang on, that doesn't seem very vaccine science. How does that work? Most cases of people catching it happen within their home. So that doesn't make sense. And then it is, well, we got to wait for a vaccine before we can do anything. So, okay, fine. And then in the most miraculous medical advancement, possibly in all of history, within less than a year, boom, we've got vaccines. They're tested, they're approved. They have, depending on where you look, 95 to 98% efficacy. And it's like, okay, so we've done everything we've been told to do. And now, over a year into it, now what you're saying is, well, we'll see what you can do once you're vaccinated. It's like the American population or the global population, how long can you expect us to put up with that when you keep, I understand you're not purposely moving the goalpost for any, political purposes or whatever, but when you tell us there's an end in sight and then we get there and it's like, well, actually, we're going to kick the can down the road a little bit longer. And it's like, we're people, you know what I mean? We're people, especially in the United States, who value freedom and the right to make our own choices and the right to take our own risks. And yet we're constantly being told by our officials, yeah, you're just going to have to hold off a little bit longer. It's like at some point, damn that, I will take my risk. I'm going to work. I am going to do the things I love to do because clearly, I don't know how much data there is to suggest that all of these measurements, the lockdowns, the masks, all of it really stopped anyone from dying.
Well, okay.
You could say it
You
slowed it
brought a lot
down
of points up
because
here. Can I speak to any of them, or
go for it.
you said a lot of stuff. First of all, we are all free, and if you don't want to wear a mask, don't wear a mask. Not saying that everyone
Mhm.
around you is going to say, "Hey, you idiot," and
So
throw
and so.
masks at you. Not going to
Mhm.
say that's not going to happen, but that has nothing
No.
to do with the government. That has to do with people around you who are saying, respect the fact that I don't want to get your germs, so wear a mask. That's so
Mhm.
you are free to do whatever you want to do. You don't want to wear a mask. You don't want to hunker down at home. You
Except
don't want to
for
do this.
except
No,
for
you can do that
operating your
too.
business in certain states, you don't have the right to do that.
Well, that's true, but that's also past. That's not the way it is right now. We are not, I don't know any business that isn't open at least 50% capacity now. I don't know of any. And frankly, our governor was probably one of the most conservative in this pandemic in the States. I mean, I don't know anybody. I mean, even Muriel Bowser, who was pretty conservative, wasn't as conservative as Larry Hogan has been. So,
Yeah.
So there's that. And I don't hear people saying, "Oh, well, now we've told you this, and we told you this, and now we're taking it all back. So no, you still have to wear a mask, and you still have to, quarantine in your home and all that." I don't know anyone who's saying that. I don't know anyone who's saying that. I don't know where you're getting your news sources from, but clearly not the mainstream, because I listen to the mainstream news, and none of them are saying that.
I'm not saying I'm getting it from news source. I'm getting it from people that I deal with in day-to-day life. And
then
I can't imagine it's only my close-knit circle of people who are feeling this way when, again, California, as of, I think, 3, maybe 4 weeks ago, still was not allowing indoor dining. They even weren't allowing
my friend
outdoor
who lives
dining
there
there for a
says
little
that's
while.
not true, but it shut down over the holidays because it was bad, and it's since opened back up, and now they're at 50% capacity as well. So, and that's based on my best friend who actually lives in LA, and for over the holidays you can go to his favorite bar on the corner, and now he can. So I don't. Again, I'm doing my best not to make these huge, broad statements, because I'm not everywhere. I don't know everything. But what I see from the news, which is from my trusted news sources, I watch BBC, I watch CBS. I mean, yes, I do occasionally watch CNN. I do occasionally watch Fox. But I mean, I watch things that I trust and have less opinion and more actual fact in my view.
Okay.
And a lot of what you're saying, I just don't find to be true. In terms of what they're saying, I just don't see that. I'm not seeing that.
Okay. Well, I think out of 330 million people, and even if you take the adults, you can call it maybe 200 million people, I would say it's safe to say there are people who are sick of it.
Oh my God,
Could we agree
everyone's
on
sick
that?
of it.
Okay,
I don't know anyone
so there are
who's
people
not
who are sick of it. And I remember a video just a few months ago of this woman who her restaurant was shut down in California.
Yeah.
Even her outdoor dining was shut down. And she's crying, and she goes, "But you look at the end of my parking lot, there's a movie producing studio with a tent for outdoor dining."
Yeah.
What the hell is this about? You know
I
what
agree.
I mean?
That was ridiculous. That was ridiculous.
Yeah, and
it's like,
and I've seen videos of people, all these people combating health inspectors in their restaurants. Like, I'm not fucking shutting down. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You're doing your job, but I have to do my job too. I have people who depend on me. There are numerous cases of this happening. So again, I think some of the frustration has to come from the yanking of the carrot, so to speak. And again, I'm not saying it is politically motivated or that if someone's just like trying to do a power grab, like, "Oh, keep going, you're almost there." But the fact remains, we started with 15 days to slow the spread. That's where it started. We are now a year removed from that statement. And there are still states who are not functioning the way they did, or even close to it, or even making progress to it since pre-pandemic days. So
I agree. And we also were told in the very beginning that if it took 10,000 lives, it would be the worst thing ever. And now we're at almost 600,000 dead.
Well, there was also suggestions that it would be 2.2 million people, and we're still a far away from that. But I think it's pretty common practice that nobody punishes the pessimist, right? So if someone says 2.2 million people are going to die and only 500,000 people die, well, you call that a win. But if someone says 10,000 people are going to die and 500,000 people die, it's like, you are dead. Get out of here. We can't have that. You know what I mean? So I think that's obviously an element that exists in society.
Okay.
But getting back on track.
I would say that was a left turn, wasn't it? That was a real left
I
turn.
was just flat. That wasn't even one of our planned topics. We'll pick it right back up. Okay, sorry for the delay, guys. We had to take a quick little bathroom break. We've been, I think, an hour's already flown by. We've still got like 3 topics to touch on. So circling back to where we started, your hopes for the Biden presidency was a return to civility, a return to shortening the divide between all of us that is so just blatantly there. It's embarrassing, quite frankly. So I have one question, and then that'll lead into our next topic. Somehow we'll figure out a way to parlay it. What is the over/under on President Harris happening, do you think? What kind of timeline do you think we're looking at?
You know, when you mention this, first of all, I think Biden is going to make it his entire first term.
You think so?
I do.
Okay.
I doubt that he will run again. But I think he will make his first term, and I think Kamala will run again. And whether she gets elected or not, I don't know. I really don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any stretch of the word. I find them entertaining sometimes, and I find them intriguing. But there's never been one where it's like, oh my God, I've just uncovered something huge here. You know what I mean? So I think it's fishy, we'll say, that Kamala Harris started out the 2020 election run as the front runner essentially for a few months there, right? I mean, she was the one being lauded by the media.
Yeah.
She was the favorite in the polls. So I don't know whose polls, but somehow, yeah. And then once she started getting the attention that a front runner gets, and also once Tulsi Gabbard came in and just clobbered her, that quickly fell apart. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Kamala dropped out before they got to the California primary, which is her home state.
Yeah.
Because she knew she wasn't polling well. So, you know what? I said this a few times on the show. When they had the first Democratic debate and Kamala whacked Joe with the, I'm not saying you're racist,
Yeah.
but what you did was racist, I said out loud in that moment, that is how she just became the vice president of the United States. It was in that moment. I don't know why. I just felt it. It's like, if Joe winds up, as everyone suspected, coming out as the front runner, Joe, are you a racist, or are you going to make me your vice president? Yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of a strong arm there in that effort, I believe.
Yeah.
So to take that person who, again, even her home state didn't believe she was the best fit candidate, and then kind of backdoor her into the White House, I feel like it's slightly calculated. I don't know how many people in the administration truly believe Joe Biden's going to survive physically his first full term. I got to tell you, sometimes I look up at the TV and see him. I'm just like, whoever is responsible for this is just a sick person. It is like the game that you're trying to get from trotting this, I'm sorry, poor old man out on stage and having him put words together and stammer and kind of forget what he's talking about. It's just like, shame on them, whoever that is. Now, he obviously won. I wouldn't say that is because of any sort of enthusiasm people had for him. I think it's more of a referendum on Trump than anything. I think he was just so polarizing that even the people who liked him were like, dude, it's just fucking exhausting. It is exhausting trying to support him or trying to anything, you know? So you say Biden's going to survive his first term and then she will run in an official election. I'm going to take the under on that. I think she goes into the next election as president. Maybe not this year, but definitely after year 2. I would say somewhere mid-year 3, something's going to happen. I mean, you know, you take him stumbling up the stairs to Air Force One, and sure, you could write that off as just a whoopsie, but then you get, you know, one reporter saying, well, it was very windy that day, and then you've got an aide saying, oh, well, those steps are tricky, and then you've got Psaki saying, well, he just misstepped up this. It's like, okay, so you're all clamoring to cover for this. But then at the same time, China's laughing at us. Putin's challenging him to a live debate. And it's just like, it's not a good look. It just isn't. So
I'll tell you this, it's a better look than Trump, because at least I mean, Putin's laughing at us. Good, get bent, laugh all you want to. I don't care about you. I mean, China's laughing at us. That I'm not so sure about.
Oh no,
At least
the
Merkel's
summit
not
they
laughing
did.
at us. At least, at least our allies aren't like, oh crap, what's going on now? I mean, what is America? What has America become? So at least that. Do I look? You please understand one thing.
Mhm.
My vote for Biden was more of a vote against Trump. Were there other people in the pack of the Democratic pack that I would have voted for president? Yeah, one in particular, but yeah, I certainly would have.
Yeah.
And he was an outsider too.
Who did you like?
I would have voted Buttigieg in a minute. I mean, he's smart, he's young, he's got ideas, he's
Very Obama-esque.
very much so. He's an outsider.
At least in front of the camera.
All the things that people wanted or were hoping that Trump was going to be, Buttigieg actually was, but it wasn't to be. So fair enough. I'll tell you this though, Trump was worried about Biden. That's why the whole Ukrainian phone call thing. That's why that whole thing even happened. I mean, you want to talk about, So I mean, it wasn't just Democrats. Frankly, I think Democrats' biggest problem is that they don't ask us, the true Democrat, the true, liberal, what is it that you want? What do you think? Because what I think would wind up happening is they would find that almost all of us are in the center. I think they would find all thinking Republicans. And trust me, there's just like there's whack job left wingers, there's whack job right wingers, and we saw that
100%.
play. But I think most America is in the center. We want someone who's going to just be decent and not lie every day and not cause drama every day and not die in 20 minutes. And I mean, all these things. We just want me.
I agree. And I think the problem is it's the outsiders or the outliers who are being the loudest. And so that's kind of where all the
news, doesn't it?
That's where all the attention goes to that. But I agree with you. I think there's a silent majority smack dab in the middle, just going, why can't we just get along anymore? Like I don't understand.
So silent. I mean, not so silent. 80 million people did not vote for Joe Biden. They voted against Donald Trump, and that's more people who ever came out for any presidential election. Period. So
isn't that astounding?
Not so silent, huh?
Isn't that astounding?
Astounding. It's astounding.
Yeah.
It is astounding. Yeah. It's like, why doesn't this happen all the time? Why isn't this always the way it is? But I don't think it's so silent. I used to think during the election, like, crap, I hope this
maybe it's not silent, but maybe it's just getting less attention, I think.
As well
because there's no ratings in people agreeing and just wanting
absolutely. You're going to show a picture of people storming the Capitol, or you're going to show a picture of two people sitting in a room agreeing with one another. Come on.
Or sitting on a podcast, just having a conversation.
Absolutely, bro. I mean, you know what's going to lead the news. You know that.
Yeah.
So
100%.
But then again, thinking people with brains and go, it's not just a headline. It's not just 140 characters. These are nuanced issues. They need a nuanced approach. They need people who are smarter than me. They need me to be smarter than, I'm treated, and so on and so forth. And that's the way to work back.
Yeah. Well, I think that is an excellent parlay into our next subject. I don't know how we were going to do it, but you just said nuance. And I'm like, you know what? Speaking of nuance, awesome. One of the first executive orders President Biden passed was I can't remember how he phrased it, but the anti-discrimination against transgender people, students specifically, but writ large as well, in sports and playing for the teams or the leagues of which they identify instead of which they biologically were born. I don't know if we've had a more nuanced situation that doesn't it can't possibly just have this is the solution. Done, it's fixed. Like, it is so complicated, especially when you're trying to take everybody's feelings into account and Anyways, to kick this off, what do you think about that? Do you have any particular stance on that, or is it just kind of like it's above my
Hey, great.
out of my lane?
No, actually, I actually do. I've done a little research because you mentioned this a week or so ago. So I've done a little bit of research on this. First of all, the executive order that Biden signed was to undo and reinstate what Obama had, which was an anti-discrimination executive order based on not only gender but orientation and
Identity.
and identity and all of this, and it's pretty generic. I mean, honestly, it's pretty generic. Trump had gotten rid of that and signed one in which made it illegal for transgendered people to be considered as people. Really,
they identify well.
Yeah. They can't be who they want to be. They have to be who that administration felt they should be.
Sure.
And as far as the sports, and so what's happened since is the states, as happens, decide, well, that's the federal stance. I'm going to do what my constituents want to do. And in Idaho, they're putting the screws to transgender.
I believe we're up to
doing the opposite.
Yeah, I believe we're up to 26 states have ruled against it as we stand today.
And I would venture a guess that they're all red or darn close to it. But I was most concerned about the whole sports angle, because to me, it kind of felt like, and I know there's a lawsuit in Connecticut, but that's high school sports. And I'm not sure that should be decided again with just this blanket, this is the way it is. The Olympic Games and worldwide sports have been dealing with this since 2004. I mean, sure. there are regulations in place. Yes, you can compete as the gender that you identify with, but you have to have lived as that gender for at least a year. You have to have had
the proper hormonal treatment.
The transition, and then the hormone treatments, and your hormone level or testosterone levels have to be correct, so it levels the playing field in terms of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, to me, I'm saying, well, if you can figure out a way to make sports fair, because some guy named Bubba with a beard who becomes transgender, but he's still got muscles the size of my head. I don't see how that's fair, but they managed to find a way to make it fair, and it's been this way for almost 2 decades. So yeah.
Well, I think the thing is, it's like, okay, if your hormonal levels are at par with what they should be based on what you identify, okay, that's one thing. But you've also had the experience of living estimated 18 to 30 years of your life, say in the case of a transgender woman, as a man. You've built the bone structure, the bone density, the muscle structure of a man, which I believe the entire reason we have men's sports and women's sports is because we've always recognized there's a difference there. I mean, there was, I can't remember the guy's name, but there was a tennis player, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or so.
Renee Richards.
Venus and Serena Williams were trying to play against the #1 male tennis player in the world at that time to prove something. And he said, no, thank you. Like, I appreciate the offer, but, either I beat the crap out of a girl or I get beat by a girl, and in no way do I come out of this a winner publicly. So they went down the list of the rankings until, again, I can't remember the guy's name, but he was like something like number 200 in the country. And he's like, yeah, I'll do it. It's all publicity for me, nobody cares. And he smoked, I think Venus held her to no score. I think Serena scored once, and he was smoking cigarettes the entire time, back-to-back games in the same day, and just smoked them both. So it's like, so you take men, you take women, does the most strong, fast, capable woman, is she better at sports than, say, a middle of the pack guy? Possibly on a good day, sure. But I think the issue that most people have is that the women who are excelling in these leagues, let's say, for example, high school women who are fighting for scholarships, you now take a middle of the pack male track runner and put him in the female race, and all of a sudden he's shattering records. So I find it hard not to see it as another glass ceiling for women in that regard. And I think that's what the biggest issue is. It's not that you don't have a right to exist, or you can't identify how you want to, but we have different sports leagues for a reason. Like it isn't just as simple as, well, boys over here, girls over here, but it's all the same. Like, so yeah, like
Well,
you
I
said,
think
it is.
sorry, go ahead. Go
No,
ahead.
I was just saying it is very nuanced. And I don't see how just saying, well, this is how we're going to do it, tough shit. I don't see how that's not unfair to women, first of all, but just how it's even a passable solution to begin with.
Yeah, I hear you. I do hear you. And that was my concern with this whole thing, especially high school sport, especially high school sports. They don't have the stringent guidelines that clearly professional or certainly Olympic sports and world sports do. I don't know. I don't know what to do. I was encouraged to see that. I mean, you know, as a man, when your testosterone lowers to the point that it needs to be lowered to in order to compete in a women's sport, does that mean that you're not as strong, or it just means that your sex drive isn't? I mean,
Yeah.
again, these are questions that I really don't know the answer to. I do,
Yeah.
but I also don't think that it's fair to just say transgender men and women just can't exist anymore, and you can't serve in the military, and you can't play sports, and no, there needs to be a way to figure this out. We're smart enough to figure out the whole transition, and then we're smart enough to figure out where this can become a fair thing. And if it needs to be then a third league, then make it a third league. I have no problem with that. I mean, you know, but it should be fair. It should absolutely be fair.
I think it's difficult when the argument being made is that this woman who was born a man is a woman.
Yes.
To create a third league, saying you're the same but different.
Yeah, I hear you.
You know, I don't know. Like I said, it is so complicated, but I don't think it's just an executive order away from being solved either. You know what I mean? Like it is very nuanced. And
again,
like there was an MMA fighter. Her name is Megan Fox. No, not Megan Fox. Fallon Fox. Megan Fox is the actress. Fallon Fox. And she competed in UFC women's division and just kicked the crap out of these girls. I think she broke 3 or 4 different girls' orbital bones in their eyes.
Wow.
And then it wasn't until 3 months after she was in the UFC that they even found out she was transgender. And she had only transitioned, I think, maybe a year prior. And it's like, that is messed up. That these poor girls, I'm sorry, I don't mean to say poor girls. These are obviously very badass women who can kick my ass any day of the week. But they go into this having trained their whole lives for this, having put in the work and effort to be the best woman fighter in the world. And then this biological male who has had the benefit of growing up as a man and having the bone structure and density and muscle, all that. And this girl comes in and just kicks the crap out of every woman competitor. The only silver lining I saw in it was that eventually a biological woman did beat this Fallon Fox. And it's like, you know what? Okay, that thank God, because this was just, it was sad to watch for a while.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for sure, this has to have, I mean, transgender men and women are not just bone structure. They're not just competing in sports. They're not just doing these things.
No, they're people.
Where male and female are judged differently.
You're absolutely
Men and women are judged separately when it comes to these athletic feats. And they're judged differently for a reason, and it has to do with physiology. That's it. So in that arena, there has to be something in there that is fair for both, because it's not, because I agree with you, it isn't fair for a transgender person to just walk in and say, yeah, you know, I can smoke you all because.
Sorry, I had a phone call come in. Sorry.
Oh, all right.
No, yeah, you're right. We are
needs a lot more study, and it needs a lot more careful observance than I have. That's for sure.
100%. I think with the entire thing, not just sports, but the entire picture, I think my biggest issue is there are women, biological women, with concerns. I don't want a woman with a penis changing in my locker room with me. The same reason I wouldn't want a man with a penis changing in my locker room. Or I like, for example, there are lesbians who want just an all woman event or group or something. And it's like, now I'm the offensive one because I don't want a penis intermixed with what I'm doing. And I think it's unfair because I have this conversation with my wife recently, and she was talking about it. She's like, I wouldn't care if a transgender woman was in my locker room, even if she was pre-op. I'm like, okay, so what about just a man in your life? Well, no, I wouldn't like that because men are capable of raping. And it's like, but this transgender woman who's pre-op has all of the same faculties.
Yeah, but there's a pretty big distinction there. I mean, that's a pretty big
of course, and I'm not, and I want to be very careful here because I don't want to say that every transgender woman has the opportunity to rape somebody. But as we all know, there are opportunists in the world who look for something, and not even opportunists. I mean, at the end of the day, this person was born biologically a man. They have the same thought process. They have the same equipment. I would say the odds are maybe not equal, but they got to be close, that a transgender woman is capable of some of the same evils just a regular, average, run-of-the-mill man is. You know what I mean?
Well, I think a human being is. I don't think that evil has a lock on one gender or the other. First of all, second of all, I think these people, the transgender community, they're giving up or searching for something that I don't understand because it's not me. I mean, a little bit because I'm gay, so I get a little bit of that. I understand wanting to just be. I understand wanting to just be fair and be
100%.
And and the thing is, think about it. I mean, 100 years ago, gay men were being put in prison and hard labor for their lives, and African Americans were living under Jim Crow for 400 or worse for 100 years, and even worse for 400 years. So I mean, everybody thinks this is the worst problem in the entire world, and oh my God, what do we do? And oh my God, we can't have this, and we can't do this, and we can't do that.
Yeah.
When every minority pretty much has come through those ranks and come out and said, I want to be treated like you are treated. And to me,
100%.
that is the end of the day. As far as sports is concerned, cross that bridge when you get to it, figure out the best way you can, learn as you go. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, there's got to be a solution in there somewhere. I'm sure
100%.
there is, but it is also a different. I mean, I'm not a straight man, so don't treat me like a straight man. You know what I mean? But don't disrespect me because I'm not a straight man. You see what I'm saying? So yeah,
100%.
All individual people who have to be handled with respect and care and respect with who they are and who they perceive themselves to be.
100%. And I think, like I said, I think just my biggest concern is the idea that any woman who feels uncomfortable or feels wronged by this is widely just, well, that's because you're a transphobe. That's all that is. And it's like, I think there's a real concern. I think that some women have every right to be concerned about this, even if it's, you could just explain it away or whatever. I don't think the knee-jerk reaction speaks to necessarily any evil or any hatred coming from women. I think these are real concerns to be had, and I think they need to be discussed. I don't think it's, like I said, I don't think it's as simple as just executive ordering it away. And it's like, well, if you're against it, then that's because you're a transphobe. Like,
well, I agree. I don't think that's what the executive order did. And absolutely, everyone deserves a voice in this, and everyone deserves to feel the way they feel, and everyone deserves to have their voice heard. I don't think the executive order was, just do it and then not think about it anymore. I don't think that at all. It's a very small first step to understanding what every minority in this country has gone through. And, the paradigm is shifting, and that's just the way it is. Agreed.
So you're actually pretty damn good at making things just kind of parlay into each other. Because on that note, with the minorities just wanting to be and exist, there is, as I'm sure you've seen, I've seen, a lot of people have seen, there has been a huge wave of hate crimes happening against Asian Americans in the United States. And I think we can actually take this, you know, after first touching on the hate crime against Asians, I think we can kind of just broadly paint this across just discrimination and racism at large in this country, because I feel like maybe it's probably not as bad as it ever was, but there's definitely a much brighter light shined on it as we stand today. You know what I mean? And it's even gotten to a point where I think things that aren't racist or discriminatory or what have you are even just being lumped in with things that are, for the sake of, I don't know why, but just calling it what it is. So starting with the hate crimes against Asian Americans happening right now, there's a big narrative being painted that it is because white supremacy is on the rise, right?
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? Do you think it's maybe a little more complicated than that?
Well, yeah, I think it's all more complicated than just that. But I absolutely think that that is a big part of it. Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I think what's happening is that white America is realizing that in 10 years, we're not going to be the dominant. We're going to be a minority, or at least equal to. And I think that's why Trump was as popular as he is as popular as he is, because he is scaring the shit out of people who aren't a minority. And in 10 years, the minorities are going to be the majority. And, you know, that scares the crap out of people. And there's one way, the best way to get elected or to get something just to scare the hell out of everybody about the opposite, or about the thing that's happening over there. Scare about that, and then you're in like Flint. And I think that's really, more than anything, I think that is what's going on. And this is it's a last gasping breath, because most white people don't think that way. Most white people think the Proud Boys and those people who attacked the Capitol were bigoted, racist jerks. That's how most people think. Most people, when they see some guy on the news knock an 80-year-old Asian grandmother to the curb because she gave him, or she brought the pandemic here, I mean, people don't think that way.
I get what you're saying. I would like to just touch on a couple of points there. Number one, Trump sounding the white supremacy alarm wasn't at all what captured my attention or garnered him my vote either. I think Trump sounding the alarm on just how far radical leftism is going to go and how far it will reach. And this will be something that I think we can talk about in our next topic, but I just want to just touch on that just to clarify now. Like, for example, when they were taking down Confederate statues, Trump said, "What's next? Abe Lincoln?" And then sure as shit, not 6 months later, people are taking down statues of Abe Lincoln. So that was kind of more where I aligned with why I voted for Trump, was because I thought he was a bulwark against radical leftism, not against minority uprising. That's just me personally. I'm sure there are people who thought that. I mean, just statistically, there has to be. Me personally, that wasn't my view.
But taking down a statue on federal land of people who owned other human beings 100% and perpetuated that, they've no business, because you know what? Trump isn't the only person who lives in the United States.
100%, and I agree.
So yeah, you know where those things, they belong in a museum somewhere saying, look, this is what we used to be. That's it. They don't belong on federal land. So
no, 100%. And at the very least, it should come down to the communities who have to look at it on a day-to-day basis. I 100% agree. I'm not at all justifying that racist statues of slave owners should stay up. But what I'm saying is, he definitely called the shot in saying, okay, so we take these down today. What's next? We're going to take down Lincoln. We're going to take down Washington. We're going to take down Columbus. And then literally we just spent an entire summer. Lincoln was a racist asshole?
I said Columbus was a racist asshole. Yeah.
That could be debated, but that's fine. Okay, so Columbus was a racist asshole, but Lincoln wasn't. I mean, there was literally, I want to say in California, a high school decided to rename Abraham Lincoln High School because he didn't show in his life that Black Lives Mattered. This was a literal argument that they had. And it's like, come again?
Look,
didn't
the
what?
pendulum is swinging. This is what happens.
Yeah, for
This is what
sure,
happens.
for
When
sure.
Barack Obama was elected, the pendulum was way, way, way over here. Well, that's to the right. Way over here to
For
the
sure.
left. Right?
For
That's
sure.
what happened. So then,
Hmm.
in order to combat this incredible fear, they elected Trump, which and then swung way the hell over here. And now
Yeah.
many of us are going, okay, look, we got to land somewhere in the middle. So we're doing Biden, and it's still over here. I mean, so yes, it's hyper sensitive right now. Some of it I agree with, some of it I don't. Some of it I think is appropriate, some of it I think is not. I don't. Also, and I'm going to say this, as a white male living in this time, in this era, for 33 years with a black male, I can tell you that where I was when I met him, politically, liberally, all of it, in terms of race relations, was very different than where I am now.
Of course.
I learned so much from him, stuff that I never even knew existed, or stuff that I thought was just, oh, you're just whining about it, or you're just this, or you're just that.
Of course.
There's no way, and there's just no way until and unless, as a white human being, you just go, okay, I'm just going to listen, and I'm going to see, and I'm going to see if this is it, see this. And so, yes, we're sort of moving forward slowly but surely, and more white people, I think, are realizing that it's really not hard. It's really not bizarre. It's really not all that different than what I think now, except I see now where you're coming from in a way that I didn't before. And I think that's the real lesson, that at the end of the day, everyone's trying to teach everyone else. They're just doing it in thousands of different ways.
I agree. I think, though, at least for me, as a white man, my biggest problem is the notion that racism only comes from white people.
True.
Or supremacy only comes from white people. Because what if I were to tell you that in San Francisco, and this may be where you use my comeback back at me, but this is that, I can send you the link for this. 85% of the Asian hate crimes happening in San Francisco are at the hands of Black people.
I wouldn't be surprised at that. I mean,
you know what I mean? Like
that
video of the grandmother that you brought up.
Well, I've said that. Yeah.
If I'm thinking of the same one, that was a Black man who did.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, look, there's a Broadway show called Avenue Q, and in it they have a song, and it says everyone's a little bit racist. Everyone's a little bit racist. It's hard not to be. I mean, and it's a whole litany of things that are a little bit racist that we all do. Everyone, regardless of skin color or so on and so forth. Anyway, all I'm saying is that the shared experience between white America and Black America, or even minority America, is oftentimes very, very, very different.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. And I think, shoot, I just had a point I wanted to touch on. I think that the problem is like, okay, let's take, for example, the most recent string of shootings that we've just had. We'll take I believe it was Georgia, the guy who shot up the massage parlors. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the narrative to immediately come out of that was, this is just another example of anti-Asian hate crime, right? But as you dig a little deeper and do a little bit of investigating, you find out this guy was a lunatic sex addict who felt such guilt and remorse for himself that he took out the women he paid to sleep with him, not Asians because he hates Asians. But the headline is, white supremacy attacks Asians again. And then you take the guy who just happened in Colorado, in Boulder, in the same vein, they wanted to say, well, it's white supremacy. And look how he's just being handcuffed and arrested instead of shot down like a Black man would be. And then again, just a little bit of investigation, you find out he's actually a Syrian guy. And it wasn't an AR-15. It was an AR-15 style pistol. I believe in 1911 is what they call it. But it was a pistol at the end of the day. So they are, so now that they found that out, suddenly there's a pivot in the media where it's, okay, well, this one's not white supremacy, but it is guns, and that's the problem. And
What's your point?
my point is that when you're looking for racism everywhere, you're not finding real racism anywhere. When you're constantly trying to attribute things to racism, again, look at this white guy with the AR-15 being just handcuffed and arrested. Well, he's actually Syrian with a pistol.
Well, it
Well,
sounds
okay,
to me
but
like
guns are
it sounds to me like the problem isn't. It sounds to me like the problem is the media. It sounds to me like people are trying to find a story and they have to put something on the 6 o'clock news because they're being paid to do it, so they have to do it before it's investigated. The guy in Georgia, if they didn't know if it was Asian or not, then they should have said, "I'm not saying a word. I don't know if it is or if it isn't. I'll let you know when I investigate it," and that would have shut the media down. But that wasn't the case. Also, I'd like to say one other thing. There's such a thing as micro-racism, which is something that I had never, it's a term that I hadn't really heard much about until maybe, I don't know, the last 5 or 6, I was in Chicago. So 5, 6 years ago, 6, 7 years ago. Maybe. And the point is the guy who massacred the Asian women at Asian massage parlors because he's a sex addict. Well, that feeds a stereotype that Asian women work in massage parlors and they have sex with men. You see what I'm saying? So there's like, and that's the distinction that's trying to be drawn here.
Well, no, because it wasn't just, oh, well, this is an Asian massage parlor. This was one that he personally patroned.
But again,
he got the sexual act from these people. No,
feeding a stereotype, though, don't you think?
How is it feeding a stereotype if that's actually a service they offer? It's not like he walks in and goes, "Hey, you're Asian, right? Go ahead and give me a tug job." It's like,
no, you're Asian. I'm going to blow you away because that's you're all sex workers.
No, it's because you took my money for sex, and I can't do that anymore. Again, none of it makes sense. None of it's logical. But this is at least what the shooter himself is contributing this to. And even the sheriff investigating is like, maybe it was racist. We're going to have to look into that a little further. But this is what he said. And if he was an overt racist and he was just anti-Asian, why would he blame it on something as weak as sex addiction?
Well, I don't know. I'm not going to crawl inside the mind of a serial killer.
Yeah.
I don't care, frankly, at all about this man. I think we've wasted too much time talking about him already.
Yeah, agreed. I don't know his name, so yeah.
Yeah, but I do think, though, that coupled with 150% increase in Asian hate crimes, Asian and Pacific, AAPI hate crimes over the last year, is absolutely is something going on here that people are really pissed off at Asians about, and they're really pissed off, and it makes, and so yes, to draw that distinction, sure. I mean, I get how people jump there first. I get it.
What I find really interesting is I just saw a chart from the Bureau of Justice Statistics, and it was essentially it wasn't hate crimes, but it was violent crime by race, right? So based on victimhood. So they had white people. The vast majority of violent crime happened to white people was against white people. Latino people, the vast majority of violent crime happened against them were Latino people. Same with Black people. But what was interesting was that with the Asians, Black people actually made up the vast majority of violent crime against Asian people, not Asian people. And this was as of 2018. So I don't know how drastically it's different now. We're gonna have to wait for them to suss that out. But there is, so far as I know, no other instance of a racial community where that's the case, where the most violence that happens to you, I guess you can't call Jewish a race, but maybe they're up there too. I don't know, but where
religious prejudice is certainly a thing.
Certainly, but I think this chart was specifically on race. So again, I don't know. I don't think Jews would tie into this, but
right.
Across the whole board, it was the only instance where in a racial community, the most violence was happening at the hand of another race. It was intraracial and not interracial, or sorry, the opposite.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. That's an interesting fact.
Yeah,
I have I don't know what to say about it.
Yeah, no, I don't either. I don't know what the hell to make of it. But like you said, something is going on. But I think it's not only lazy, but I think it's dangerous to just say, oh, well, it's white supremacy. Like somebody, I'm sure you love this guy, but I believe it was Ben Shapiro said, when people argue religion, there's what's called the gap of God. And what you can't explain, well, that's God, because that's just God. He did it. That's why. So what he said was there's this thing happening on the left where white supremacy is their gap of God. So when
Yeah.
you can't fully explain why Asian hate crimes are on the rise, or like you said, I think 150% increase. Well, it must be white supremacy. Except when you bore out the facts, you realize, well, Black people are doing a lot of the damage to these Asian people. So I feel like, especially in today's climate, you're kind of caught in a rock and a hard place between, well, Black Lives Matter, stop Asian hate, white people. It's got to be white people.
Well, the thing is, it has. Gosh, how do I say this? I think racism has to do with power. I think it has to do with one person having power or trying to exercise power over another. White people have been in power consistently since this country was born. So, I mean, I have a theory that goes back to, the first people who I'm not going to go there. So I'm not even going to go there.
Okay.
I've expressed it to Jared before, and he said, "Yeah, maybe not." But so it's probably stupid. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, yeah. Is racism sort of the trash bin with which everything is being thrown into right now, or the hoop that everything is the litmus test that everything is measured after? Absolutely, it is. And frankly, I say it is about time, because the pendulum has been sitting again way over here for hundreds of years in this country. And it is and I think it has to do with fear. I really honestly do. I think it has to do with fear. I think it has to do with fear that those who are in power their power is being diminished just by sheer population. And it scares the hell out of them. And I think that's a thing. I mean, I just do. And I think that Black people deserve way more than they've ever been allowed to have. And the people who have all the power are the ones being called racist, because they're the ones who have all the power. They're the ones who can do something about it. If you choose not to do anything about it, then who could you blame?
Yeah, well, I hear you, and I get what you're saying. I don't understand how that answers why there's such a I don't know the word I want to use, why there's such a discrepancy in the fact that Black people are doing a lot of, if not most of, the hate crimes against Asian. What do white people have to do with that? What is our role in that happening?
Fair enough. I wasn't really speaking, I was really speaking more of African Americans than I was about Asian Americans. So point taken.
Fair. And then, there's also, I mean, Asian, I don't want to say racism, but I mean, that's kind of been a thing for several years. I mean, within this past century, we had the Japanese internment camps.
Yeah.
Big uh-oh. Don't know what the hell anyone was saying, but that happened. Okay. Then we move forward. And now we're at a point where Asians literally have to work harder to get into big colleges because they're so overrepresented in like Ivy League schools or tech schools or whatever. They literally have to score higher than a white person does just to get in. And then even then, it depends on how many we've already got on hand. I believe when I was in Boston, Harvard's the one that's in Boston, right? Or in Massachusetts?
Yale's in Connecticut,
whichever Ivy League school was up there. Excuse my, I was there when it happened. I saw quite a few rallies. Yeah, I saw quite a few rallies of Asian people pissed off that there is a quote on how many of them can get into the school, even though they, quite frankly, deserve it more than anybody else. Not deserve because they are Asian, but because, dear God, how hard they work. Just generally as a culture, as a society. Obviously, there's outliers, sure, but generally speaking, they value education much higher than I would say even white people do. So that has been a thing for quite a few years. How it's sparked into violence against them, or even if there's a causation between the two, I don't know. But I find it interesting that it is just now getting that sort of national attention, and yet it is being ignored that it's not just white people doing it.
I hear you. I hear you. I don't think that there is a market on intelligence or on working hard or any of those things. As far as quotas and things like that are concerned, it's the best metric we have. How else would you do it? You can't have
merit. I think merit.
Well,
merit would be a good way.
Merit is a good way, but there are underserved communities who merit isn't always represented in grades or in number of awards that you've received, because your school doesn't have toilet paper because we don't, because it's not funded well enough to even have toilet paper. So you're struggling. The fact that you show up to school every day in some places is more merit than so there have to be different metrics. There have to be a way to measure these things that don't always appear fair on the outside, but it's the best system that we have at the moment. And there are people smarter than me working to fix them every day, working to make them better every day. Good, it should be. I mean, is that a system? No, of course not.
I wouldn't say I am all for placing underprivileged people in higher, I guess, sought after schools. I don't know how productive I see that as being, especially because it'd be one thing if it's like, you've got the grades, you're in, okay, that works. But when you're telling, say, for example, in the case of affirmative action, Black people, you don't have to score as high as the white kid next to you. You've got to score, within 100, 200 points of that. And then you're in Harvard. And then come to find out that Black student winds up, they can't handle it at Harvard. It's too much, or it's too hard. But had they gone to, say, I don't know, NC State or something like that, they probably would have flourished. So I understand what's trying to be done in, I don't want to say lowering the bar, because that just sounds insulting. It's like the subtle racism.
Lower the bar, though.
It's like it's the subtle racism of lowered expectations, right? So
I don't think so. I just don't think that. You know what? For hundreds and hundreds of years, African Americans were denied equal education.
100%. I agree.
I remember in Massachusetts, when I was 12, before we moved to Florida, I remember seeing, before I went to school in the morning, school buses, high school, elementary school buses being overturned in Boston because of desegregation. I remember these things happening in my lifetime. This was happening. You can't
100%.
turn these things around in one generation or two generations or three generations, especially since there have been a dozen generations that have been diminishing it. So it's going to take time. And so if what needs to happen is there needs to be a metric where at the very least, we need to offer opportunities to people who normally wouldn't have them or haven't had them, and who have not come under the same paradigm. I mean, you watch Jeopardy, or not Jeopardy really, but you watch a game show and you'll see like a category that is clearly suited for white people, and there's two teams on either side, and one is a Black family, one is a white family, and the white family tears it up. And it's like, well, it's obviously it's because the shared experiences aren't the same. But that doesn't mean you can just ignore it. It doesn't mean that you don't do anything about it. No,
100%.
Twice as hard to fix it. And if that means that sometimes someone who maybe doesn't deserve it, someone who maybe isn't ready for it, someone who isn't emotionally or physically or whatever, capable of it just yet, winds up, doesn't work out for the best. The other 10 or 15 or 120 or 2,000 were and did. And these are optics that have to be celebrated, and they just have to be. They have to
100%.
be. And we're nowhere near where we're not where we were 50 years ago when I was watching those buses being overturned in Massachusetts. But at the same
Mhm.
time, this is by no means equal. This is by no
Yeah.
means equal.
Yeah, I agree. And so I want to be careful because I'm not saying that underprivileged people shouldn't be granted certain opportunities. And I'm also not at all trying to imply that, yes, history has its repercussions. It has its consequences. It has its implications. History, of course, matters. And we as a country, most certainly have not always lived up to what we believed our core values were. Yes, but what I'm saying is, when you look at the data, and for the sake of argument, I'm not going to even make up a statistic on it, but for the sake of argument, let's imagine what I'm saying is true. The majority of people placed in those much sought after schools that are placed because of affirmative action, most of them drop out. You could say it's because they can't hack it. You could say it's because they just didn't like it. I'm not attributing motive to any of it, but what I'm saying is, again, for the sake of argument, assume what I'm saying is true. The vast majority of them drop out. And what you're doing now is you're taking roster spots essentially from people who worked and got the grades and smashed the SATs to get into that school. They lose a spot for this affirmative action spot, and then that person doesn't even wind up getting the degree at the end of it. So I feel like it's far more optical than it is effective. Affirmative action.
Well, okay, on its face maybe, but then you don't know what little African-American girl or boy is looking at that Black kid who just got into Harvard and going,
oh, of course,
wow, I can do it too now, because that, and maybe that Black kid maybe he couldn't make it. Maybe he or she, maybe it was too much for them and they dropped out, maybe. But you know what?
Mm-hmm.
The seeds have been sown, and that's the problem. When I first started as an artist, I didn't know what I could do because it never occurred to me that that was possible. And then the more I studied and the more I learned and the more I looked at other people and they said, oh, I did this. I was like, oh my God, I didn't even know you could do that. Great, now I know that that's a possibility and I can do that too. It's the same thing. And that takes time. It takes generations, it takes time, but it's as important, it is the most important aspect of all of this, because do you see the results? No, I plant lots of plants out there and some of them come up and some of them don't. And then the next year, the ones that didn't come up, they do come up. So you know what I mean? Yeah, sometimes it's a crapshoot. Sometimes you don't know, but it doesn't mean that you don't make the effort. It doesn't mean that it's not essential and beneficial in ways that you can't see or you can't imagine.
So I have two counter questions to this. Number one, you mentioned the little Black kid who sees the Black person who makes it to one of those and says, man, I can do that too. Do you think the thought is I can do that too, or that will be given to me too?
No, it is absolutely not. It is absolutely, wow, that's a possibility for me too. Now I can shoot higher than I ever thought I could shoot before. When African Americans saw Barack Obama in the Oval Office, that was a pipe dream. That was a pie in the sky dream for Black America. And now all of a sudden it's real. It is possible. It is possible. It is achievable.
But
therefore,
with Barack
so
Obama,
much as so many other things.
But with Barack Obama, it wasn't, well, you almost won the election, so we're going to put you in. He overwhelmingly won. They didn't have to lower the bar to make him get into the White House.
You know why?
He overwhelmingly won.
That's true, but maybe it's because he saw 5 other African Americans who almost won and got really close, and he thought, well, you know what? I can do it, they can do it, and then he achieved. I mean, you can't negate.
We're saying the same thing, but what I'm saying is nobody lowered the bar to help him get there, is what I'm saying.
I don't think being an inspiration, whether you think you're an inspiration or not, to other people is lowering the bar.
I'm not talking about being the inspiration. I'm talking about, in the case of affirmative action in school, a Black person can literally score hundreds of points lower than a white student and get into the school while the white person does not. How is that not lowering the bar?
You know why? Because what I think is this. I think that the school system, the public school system, is is inherently, I'm not even going to say racist. I'm going to say povertyist.
100%. And that's why I'm
And
such
the
an
rich
advocate for school
people
choice.
and the public schools in the best neighborhoods just happen to be chock full of white people. And the public schools in the poorest neighborhoods just have to be chock full of black and brown people. And so then what? So then the public schools that don't get as much public funding and don't have computers and laptops and iPads and don't go on field trips to New York City and so they just suffer. And yes, they're not going to have the experience that the schools with the most money have. They don't know how a computer works because their school doesn't have one. You can't.
Not at all.
That
Not at
has
all.
to be accounted for.
100%. But what I'm saying is, yes, for those people in the underprivileged schools, and I won't even say based on it, I'll say it as you did as class, because I would think there's plenty of people in, I don't know, White Appalachia or in the Ozarks.
Absolutely true. That's why I stopped making it about
would be
race.
facing the
Making
same
it
problem.
about class.
Of course. But what I would say is that, yes, you're going to have to work harder to get there, but it doesn't mean it's off the table. There are plenty of people who come from those schools who go off to do amazing. I would imagine.
And there are plenty of George W. Bushes out there too, whose daddy got him in and he coached the whole time.
100%.
And
Agreed.
I mean, there's plenty of those people too. So it's
Agreed.
okay that
But
they
what
become
I'm-
president of the United States. That's what you should
No.
aspire to. Come on.
No. What I'm saying is, in both examples, merit should be the one deciding factor. Did you do the work? Did you get the grades? Do you qualify across an even metric across, because on
And
the other
who's
side of the coin,
deciding merit? Who's deciding merit? Who? I mean,
numbers decide merit. You don't need a face or a race attached to it. What is your grade? You got the
they
grade.
didn't teach African American history in school when I was in school. They didn't teach
I
the
don't think
real
that they
African
should.
American history. So then
don't think
what? So then what? So then African Americans don't even know their own history. So then they're being judged on a you can't.
Well,
you can't use
when I
the
was in
same
school, we
standard
gave.
for everyone because everyone isn't in the same circumstance. It doesn't.
When I was in
work that way.
school, we gave them 28 days of history, and then we moved on for the rest of the year. I'm not for that remotely. I think it should all be history, U.S. history. You don't just give them one little month where you cram all your Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks and Malcolm X all in the shortest month of the year, mind you. It should all
really
be
my point.
American history. No, I know, but
That's
that's
really
where
my
we.
point.
That's where we
point is that
landed.
who's deciding what merits count and what merits don't? That has to be a sliding scale too, because
Test results.
But test results written by who? Written by white people, there are going to be one kind of test. Written by black people, it's going to be a different kind of test. Written by Asians, it's going to be a different kind of test. Written by Muslims, it's going to be a different kind of test. So how can you say there's not one standard? There can't be one standard. It can't be. It just can't be.
Okay, so on the same token, whereas I said black people get to score lower than white people and get into the same schools, Asians have to score much higher than white people to get in the same schools. And
I'm making a lot of generalizations, and you don't know.
No.
You don't know these. These are not. You don't know these as facts. You're making a lot of rash generalizations.
For the sake of argument, let's say I'm telling the truth, because the point I'm trying to get to is I'm saying both of that is wrong. I'm not saying one's right, and I'm not saying one's. I'm saying both of that is wrong. It's ridiculous to me that a school is looking at, Jesus, we got to get some more black people in here. Instead, we should be getting the most qualified people here, regardless of their race. If Harvard was 92% Asian, I'd say good for the Asians, because at least they've earned it. They've worked for it. They got the scores. They got into that school. But when you're just, well, nope, can't let any more Asians until, I don't know, 2 semesters from now. And then, well, we got to do something about the black people. Why aren't they coming to Harvard? We got to do something to get them in here. So what if we just, like I said, subtle racism with lowered expectations, get them in here, and then at least we can say we have them. Whatever happens to them once they get in the door, that's one thing. But at least they're in the door, and we can say we have that. And that's what I'm saying the problem. You say merit based on who? I am saying merit based on work, on the work you put in, the scores that you produce. I earned based on these numbers, not background story, and not these numbers are what mean I qualify for this school. And if
Well,
I
I
don't
think
make
that is
these
a
numbers,
naive.
hold on. And if I don't make these numbers and you cram me into the school, that is your fault that I don't make it. And if I do make these numbers and you don't let me into the school, again, that's your fault.
I think that's a naive way of looking at it. I really honestly do. I don't
Okay.
think, I mean, we are a country of immigrants.
Mhm.
Everyone other than the people that we most slaughtered came
Mhm.
here from someplace else. So we can't
Mhm.
have German history, which is a country of people who for millennia were of one, size
Color.
and shape, period. Not even color. I'm talking experience and so on and so forth. That
Okay.
can't happen here.
Mhm.
That can't happen here, and it shouldn't happen here.
Mhm.
This has to be, you can't, a number is just a number, but you can't say then that this number matters more than this number, or, this school, which is rich and has all of these, extra things, private schools or charter schools and all that kind of stuff, have all of these
Mhm.
extra advantages, so their numbers are higher, as opposed to this school over here, which is in a poorer neighborhood and doesn't get the funding that the other one does, so their
Mhm.
scores are lower. So then they're dumber than them. That it can't be judged that way. You
See,
can't just take
no.
a number and say that's who you are. You can't.
I hear you. I hear you, and I understand what you're saying, but what you're leaving out is personal accountability.
How? How am I
How?
leaving
What?
that out?
You're leaving it out because when you're just saying, well, this person grew up this way and this person grew up in this school, and so this person's obviously going to get it. If there's anything this country teaches us, if you want something and you work for it, you usually get it. Now, obviously, there are times where it falls short. Obviously, there are times where it was just never meant to be. But to sit here and say, well, I'm in a shit school, so I'm not going to accomplish anything. You know how many brilliant people would not exist if that was their mentality?
You know what? There's such a thing called white privilege. And
Okay,
you and I
here we go.
are fortunate enough to live under the benefit of white privilege. That means we started out 4 steps ahead of people who were not white. That's what white privilege means. It means that you get an advantage and you live under the advantage simply because of the color of your skin. Simply because of the color of your skin. That means that means that anyone who isn't privileged because of the color of their skin has to work at least 4 times harder, because we're 4 steps ahead, or however many steps ahead we are, has to work that much harder just to get even. So then you're saying, then not only that, you can't just be even with me when I walk in with an advantage. You have to surpass me, even though I'm the one with the advantage. You start with at a disadvantage. You have to meet and surpass me. This is what's unfair. And so what has happened is school systems, corporations have decided on a quota system for lack of anything better, for lack of anything else that they can think of, so that at the very least, we can begin to sow these seeds of equality. Because if you don't want to be, if you're not willing to be genuinely equal or generously equal, then we're going to force you to be equal, because this doesn't count. This isn't the system that we have isn't fair for everyone.
Okay, so if I can just pause for just a second. You started this part of the conversation saying it wasn't a race thing, it was a class thing, and now you've just thrown white privilege into the mixture. How privileged would you say the kids in White Appalachia or in the Ozarks, how far does their privilege get them, would you say, in the education system?
You know what? That's a non-question question, really. Nothing is 100%. Nothing is 100%.
Right.
Not everyone is everything. But
that's the point that I'm trying to make. Life
so then
is
white
not
privilege
fair.
doesn't exist in your. So what you're saying is white privilege does not exist because it's not 100%. It doesn't exist at all.
That's a delicate topic.
I don't want to get anybody in trouble. I certainly don't want to get in trouble. I mean,
please. It's not like my show's big enough to get canceled anyway. So
my husband's going to watch this later, and I don't want to be for anything I did or didn't say. Believe me. Yeah. So what you're saying then is white privilege doesn't exist because it's not 100%.
What I'm saying is you started this conversation saying it was a class thing, and then throughout it, you have just made race the focal point. And what I'm saying is, life is not fair for anybody, including white Appalachia and the Ozarks and West Virginia and what have you. I mean, would you not say, barring the maybe everyday subtle racism they face, their at least educational upbringing is similar to that of the underprivileged Black community?
What group are we talking about now? White people?
White Appalachia, Ozark, West Virginia.
I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. They brought us Loretta Lynn and Dolly Parton. So I really don't know. I honestly don't know. I really don't know. I've never been there. I don't know anyone from there. I can't really speak intelligently about that at all.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I went to what was the same high school you went to, which was one of the better schools in the county. And I just didn't give a shit about it, if I'm being honest. Had I tried and had I cared, sure, I could have done great. But quite frankly, I averaged a C just so I could get the hell out of there. And then, it was time, well, you've got to do all this to get a scholarship and go to college. I want to be a chef. Screw it. I don't want to go to college. But what I'm saying is, at least part of the equation has to be personal accountability. It has to be, like, if there's someone who tried their hardest and got the grades despite all the adversity in their way, and despite every hurdle they had to jump, if they fought and they worked and they got the grades and then did not get into the school that they were more than qualified to get into, that would be a problem. Absolutely, 100%. But to sit here and say, well, you don't got to try as hard, and you can still get it. Like, okay, an example I like is, say LeBron James.
I don't know anyone I certainly have never suggested you don't have to try hard and we'll just let you coast. I've never once said that.
I'm not saying coast. I'm saying you don't have to score as high. But the example I like is, let's say LeBron James as a kid is out shooting hoops, right? LeBron James is arguably the best basketball player, at least of this generation. I think we're almost done. At least of this generation, some would argue all time. How good do you think he would be if someone said, oh, LeBron, you don't need a 10-foot hoop. Let's drop it down to 9 feet.
I got to tell you, that is not my point. That has not ever been.
No, that's my point. No, that's my point. That's what I'm saying.
That's a ridiculous point.
Why?
What are you saying? No one is saying.
What I'm saying is, if people,
they're lazy.
No.
Ridiculous.
And I want to be very careful. No one's saying anything about lazy. I'm talking about the conditions in which you're growing up and the adversity that you face. If somebody said, LeBron, drop the hoop a foot. Now learn how to play ball. How would that benefit him in becoming the greatest basketball player to ever exist?
How about this? Hey, LeBron, learn how to get this basketball in this tiny little hoop, but we're not going to give you a hoop. We're just going to give you a backdrop so you can see where the hoop should be.
And you know what? I don't know his history, but I wouldn't be surprised if that wasn't part of his upbringing. That's how he started.
And then look what he achieved. So then you take someone. But the point is, so then you take someone who doesn't look as good on paper, but has all of this going for them, all of that drive and tenacity and all of that going for them, as opposed to the wealthy over here who have a basketball court that of their own. They have coaches, they have personal coaches, they get 3 square meals a day, they get to sleep in a soft bed at night. All of these things make up a human being, and they also detract from a human, or they also harm a human being. So you can't use this test thing and say that's the only thing that matters. It just doesn't.
Well, you can, and to keep it in the basketball analogy, why aren't white people overwhelmingly represented in the NBA?
Because they're not as good, I guess.
Precisely. Despite having the basketball court at home, despite having the basketball court at home, and maybe even having personal coaches, and maybe, being signed up for a traveling team or whatever because your parents can afford it, despite all of that, they just overwhelmingly aren't as good. Now imagine if that sort of focus, despite your upbringing, despite your location, despite your society, if that sort of focus was put into education instead of basketball.
Yeah, I agree with you. It should be put. I agree with you. We were talking about the fact that the poor or the high schools and elementary schools and poor communities don't allow their students the advantages that those schools in wealthier neighborhoods do. They don't get the funding. They don't get air
100%.
conditioning in the summer. They don't get plumbing in the winter. So they're dealing with adversities that the richer schools don't have to deal with. Therefore,
But
you can't just say, because yes, you had to deal with only having one meal a day for your entire 7th grade year, but that doesn't mean it affected your schoolwork. Therefore, it affected your test scores.
No.
I'm not going to take that into
That's-
account.
No. It should absolutely be taken into account. And
Then what are you saying about the whole number thing? Then the number has to be whatever, and the highest number wins.
what I'm saying is, if you took a white kid in Appalachia, and say you put him in the exact same living situation as, say, a black kid in, we'll say Baltimore. You live in Baltimore. We'll say Baltimore. There isn't a systemically written law that says, hey, white kid, it's okay you didn't score as high. You can get into the school anyways. That kid has to bust his ass for scholarship and grants and all of it. But
I don't know.
the black kid in
in
Baltimore can score lower, cannot even express as much interest. And still, because there's a quota to be met and you're just not qualifying on your own, we will lower the bar for you, and that way you make it in. That's what I'm saying.
You know what? I think you're talking about history from the 1960s. I don't think.
No, I'm talking about today. I'm talking about today.
Well, I don't know of that. I really don't know of that. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist. I'm going to say that it happens as much in wealthy neighborhoods because then they get paid to get into the school. So if every once in a while a kid who's poor, who doesn't have as high a test score because he didn't have advantages that the rich kids had, that he gets ushered in because he or she is poor,
Okay.
it probably equals the rich kids who get paid for by everybody else. It's probably a wash. And to that, I say good.
Now let me ask you this, and then maybe this could wrap up this topic, and we can work on closing it out. Do you think there is risk of, because essentially affirmative action isn't a class-based system, it is a race-based system, 100, do you think there's risk for Black people who get into these higher educational facilities because of affirmative action? Do you think there's any risk of them believing they got into the school because they're Black?
I don't know. I'd have to ask someone and find out. I mean, I have a friend who graduated from Harvard not long ago. I could ask him.
Was he an affirmative action?
I don't know. I don't think so. He's one of the smartest people I've ever met, so I'm going to assume.
Right.
That,
see, this is what I'm saying. Because I believe that there is possibility for that. I don't know what percentage of those who do it, but I have to imagine there has to be. And if it's not,
does it matter? Does it matter?
Certainly it does. Certainly it does. If you believe that your biggest accomplishment in life is not because of the work you put in, but it's because of the color of your skin, how is that not problematic?
You know what? I'll tell you this. I'll say this to you, and I've heard Van Jones say this 100 times on CNN. My skin is my sin. The color of my skin is my sin. So if every once in a while the color of your skin is your advantage, then I say to that, good. You deserve it. It's deserved. That's what I say. I say good.
I recall another.
You know what? The color of my skin has been my advantage. So sure.
I recall another great man who
said,
said,
for me to get places because of the color of my skin, and not turnabout can't be fair play. That doesn't make sense to me.
I remember another great man who said, I have a dream that we are not judged on the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. So
exactly, but he was saying, don't target me and kill me as a racist. I mean, don't target and kill me as a murderer or as someone, you know what I mean, because of the color of my skin, not because I'm smarter than everybody.
Well, he wasn't specifying that Black people weren't judged by the color of our skin. He was specifying that people were not judged. Don't, as a Black person, look at that white man and assume he hates you because of the color of his skin, but judge him by the content of his character. That was the entire point. And we've now gotten to a point in society where the color of our skin is our biggest defining character. It's where we start off. If you can't tell, I'm white.
It is now after 4 years of Donald Trump. Yes, it is now. But that's because when he came down that escalator and said, I assume that Mexicans are rapists and murderers, He kicked this whole thing off.
Dan.
Obama was in
Dan.
office for 8 years.
And how many, wasn't the Ferguson riot under?
Oh,
Barack Obama?
absolutely, yes, and
Okay.
you know what?
Baltimore?
Which just
Wasn't
goes to
Baltimore?
show you, there was a
Wasn't
there was a
Baltimore
riot
under?
in Baltimore, there was a riot in DC, there have been riots all over the place, and it's based on race. It's because it's not.
And you don't
fixed,
think,
it's not yet
and you don't
fixed.
think for 1 second it stems from number one, his coining of the phrase of the haves and have-nots. Number two, saying Trayvon Martin looks like he could be my son. Number three, saying, well, I think people should put themselves in the black people's shoes and not the police's shoes in these situations. You don't think that had anything to do with the racial divide in our country?
Who said those things?
Barack Obama said this thing.
Yeah, good. Walk a mile in his shoes and see if he wouldn't say the same thing. That's what I'm saying. Walk a mile in his shoes and see if he wouldn't say the same thing. White America, white people who, let me say white America, people who are not African American or brown or black, or even Muslim or any minority, have no idea what it took for that minority person to get to where that minority person is right now. So instead of being
100%.
critical of that, and instead of being all like, oh, you don't deserve it, or I scored the same as you did, or whatever, maybe the time is to make things truly equal. And the thing is this, when you have had all the power for your whole lives and all of your generations back, as far as generations go, when you're the one who had all the power, when you then make things equal, it feels kind of like you're losing something. But equality isn't losing something.
Now,
it's just making other people as equal as you have always been. This is the thing I'm talking about.
Okay, when you say equality, are you saying equality of opportunity or equality of outcome?
I'm talking equality of absolutely everything. Everything. And I'm talking about inequality of absolutely everything. Everything.
Okay, that's not possible.
And yet it's here. And yet we live under that right now. That's what we're living under. This is the way we're living. Things.
What's the way?
equal.
I'm sorry, I must have missed out. What's the way we're? Yeah, no. So we all have equal opportunity, but you can't guarantee equality of outcome. Like in any scenario, even if you force it from the top down, it's not possible.
No one's saying that.
That's what I wanted to specify.
All I'm saying here is level the playing field. Make the playing field truly level. And those things that Barack Obama said, which I believe he said them too, it's because he was playing on an unlevel playing field. And you know what? And so the
Barack Obama went to an Ivy League school. He grew up in Hawaii. How unlevel was his playing field?
Okay, we're gonna go round and round.
He was a senator. He was a governor. I mean, I don't understand.
Against all odds, he certainly did achieve it. He achieved it. He did, and so
overwhelmingly,
and did amazing things.
He overwhelmingly achieved it.
Yes,
it wasn't against all odds. It was overwhelming.
Yeah,
in both presidential elections, it was overwhelming. So
yeah,
it wasn't
right.
against all
And
odds.
so
it was exactly what the odds bore out. Is what I'm saying.
Did every other president of the United States. Every other one, all other 45 of them did the same thing, who happened to move without the detrimental issues that Obama had against him. I mean, what do we, really, we're kidding here. I think that to me, this is clear. To me, white privilege exists. To me, I have been fortunate in many ways to grow up under white privilege. And I'm sure that I was afforded opportunities that my African-American counterparts or my brown-skinned counterparts were not offered because they weren't white. I do believe that. I will probably wind up with, bombs and bricks being thrown through my window, but that's what I believe. That's just what I believe. And I think, and so Black people are fighting. They're fighting for their very existence. And we deserve, all of us, even all of us who aren't African-American deserve to pay them the attention and that is deserved in this moment and has been this moment since I was born. It's like enough. It's enough. Yeah. Enough is enough. That's just what I believe. So, you know, I'm not saying that's what anyone I know believes. I'm not saying that's what anyone related to believes, but that's what I believe.
Sure.
I've been afforded things because of the color of my skin, and in my opinion, African Americans have been disafforded things because of the color of theirs.
Yeah. Now, what did you just say? You just said,
White
crap, I
privilege
had a,
exists.
yeah,
I
right.
said
So
white
this
privilege
exists.
exists.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Black people are fighting for their existence, is what I think
Yeah.
what you just said.
Yes. Yes.
What does that mean?
It means they can't call the cops when someone's trying to rob them because they'll be the ones. There's a larger percentage that they'll be the ones being murdered instead by the cops who'll get off. And I mean, what are you talking? What do you mean? Really? I mean, you watch the news. What are we talking about here?
Okay. Well, see, that I think that's the problem is watching the news, because hard empirical data would suggest that's just not true.
Oh my! Well, then show me the data. You show me the data, and I will come on your next.
It was
actually.
I will send you the link. It was provided by the Washington Post.
Awesome. I'd love to read it. I'd love to.
It was a couple of years ago, and I believe it was data for the year 2019. Number of people shot by police who were unarmed, broken down by race. The unarmed Black people. Now, that's not to say not dangerous Black people, but unarmed Black people. The entire year of 2019. It ranges, again, depending on where you look, between 9 and 15 Black people unarmed were shot by police in 2015. The number of white people was about double that. Now, you can say, well, that's because white people make up a larger percentage of the population, but when you're looking at a statistic, when you're looking at a statistic like, Dan, when you're looking at a statistic like this, you have to look at proportionate level of crime being committed.
Yes, you do. Proportionate.
Not how many people there are, because you're lumping a bunch of non-law breaking people of color or white people in with those who are. So that's not how the statistic bears out. You have to look at how much crime is being committed. And when you take into account that a major portion of violent crime happens within Black communities to Black people, to find out the number shot at the end of the year is 9 by police, and these are the unarmed ones, not the ones who are armed. Unarmed is 9. Then I'm having a hard time, call it white ignorance, seeing how, as LeBron James and as so many people said, Black people are being hunted by police, especially when you take into account in those inner cities, Baltimore, Chicago, most of the police force, including police chiefs, are Black. So
not the one who sat on George Floyd, not the one who killed Breonna Taylor, not the ones, not those rednecks who shot Ahmaud Arbery.
The one who shot Breonna Taylor was a Latino man.
Are we kidding here?
The one who shot
really
Breonna Taylor was
honestly telling me that there is not an epidemic of African American people,
100%.
people
I would say
being shot and killed by cops, and the cops then get off, not because they're Black, but because they're white. You're telling me that that's not happening. That's not a phenomenon that's happening in these United States.
That's what I would say. Yes, I would say that is anecdotal, and the empirical data does not support that. And I will send you the link
show me the empirical data, and I will read it and take it into account. Because,
and like I said, it's what I found was from the Washington Post, which is not a conservative outlet by any stretch.
No, but it's not. It's absolutely not. It's a liberal paper. I'll look at it. Absolutely, I'll absolutely look at it. I don't believe it, and I frankly don't think it even matters, to be honest with you, because when you have to have a talk with your 16-year-old son going out on a Friday night because he's Black like you, and you have to say to him, listen, this is what happens when you get pulled over, because you will get pulled over. This is what happens. This is how you deal with him. You do this with your hands. You don't speak back. You don't, I mean, these are the conversations that all African Americans that I personally know are having with their children, so that they don't get shot and killed by cops, much less pulled over. The fact that you even have to get pulled over is ridiculous. For you to say that there's not an issue, that this is not an issue, and it's not black and white, that's just crazy. That's just crazy.
So here is my issue with that. It is twofold. Number one, I was given that same exact speech when I was 16. This is how you behave in front of a police officer. Because if you don't, something could happen. It's not because of the color of my skin, it's because this is a person with a weapon attached to them who has to make split-second decisions based on what they believe a credible threat is. So this is how you behave. You put your hands up. You don't reach for anything unless you ask for permission to. I was given the same exact talk, and I know plenty of other people who aren't Black who were also given that same talk. but I also believe there is an element of, so the way it bears out is police brutality based on race is attributed to the neighborhood in which they're jurisdiction over, right? So if you're a police officer in a Latino neighborhood, odds are you're going to have a physical altercation with a Latino person. I mean, that's just statistics. Same as if you're jurisdiction over a Black community, a white community, an Asian community, whatever it is, it bears out that you're likely to have an altercation within the race of the community that you have jurisdiction over. But again, as the data would suggest, out of 330 million police interactions in the year 2019, 9 of them were Black people who were shot while being unarmed.
Yeah, you're gonna have to show me that. Can we pause for a second? We have to pause for a second. Sorry. Can I pause for a second?
Okay. Sure.
All right, hello.
All right, and we're back. So yeah, for the sake of argument, let's say what I was just previously saying was true, that in the year 2019, let's say even on the high end, of all Black people shot by police, 15 of them were unarmed and not necessarily not dangerous, but unarmed. Out of 330 million police interactions in that year, 15 of them were unarmed Black men who were shot by police. That does not, to me, an epidemic make. Now, again, you're taking my word for it. I will send you the link and you can make your own decision. But for the sake of argument, let's even say it's 100. We could even put the number up to 100. Out of 330 million interactions, would you say 100 is an epidemic?
Yeah, when you're talking about, because the police is ubiquitous and people can't, you deal with them in some way every single day. And if you think that they're out to get you, yeah, I would call that an epidemic.
Right, but if the reason you think they're out to get you is not borne out by the data, but rather what you're being told in the media, I would say that's an epidemic of bad media, not of racist police officers.
When the cops are the ones doing it to you, when there's videotapes from Rodney King in 1991, when there's 6 white cops on 1 Black man beating the shit out of him for no real reason, and then they get off and nothing happens to them, yes, I would say that's an epidemic.
I wouldn't say nothing happens to them.
There's a few professions that you can't be bad at. An airline pilot is one. You can't be a train conductor. You can't be a so-so train conductor. Can't do it.
100%.
You can't be a bad police officer. You just can't. You got to do it. You got to do it right. You have to do it best.
100%. But the assumption that all bad cops are white, I think, is, well, quite frankly, a little racist, but definitely a stretch at the very least.
I'm just talking about the ones that I've seen. I'm just talking about the ones who.
But why do you think you've seen them?
4 of them on George Floyd. 4 of them. They were all white.
But why do you think you've seen them though?
Because Black people are finally saying, hey, we're going to photograph your ass rather than have you just kill us and have no one believe us. Racism isn't gone. It's just being reported.
Well, hold on. In the George Floyd case, they literally did just stand there and film them killing him. Well, okay, no, hold on. And I want to be clear. I want to be clear because the autopsy reports are mixed at best. Some would say he died of a fentanyl overdose and not of being choked by police. But even for the sake of argument,
besides Fox News,
even for the sake of argument, I will take your stance in that the officer Chauvin kneeling on his neck is what killed him. Fine. The person with the phone just stood there and filmed it.
The person with the phone was a Black woman. What is she going to do? There's 4 of them on 1 guy. I mean, what is she think's going to happen to her?
How many people do you think were standing around in that moment?
I don't give a shit. I swear to God, I don't care how many people.
I think it matters.
But I think that it matters. The cops are the ones with the guns. The cops are the ones, 4 of them on 1 man. The cops are the ones with the bullhorns. What are you kidding?
Two of those cops were Black. One of them was Asian, and one of them was a white guy. So you show me the Black cops who killed George Floyd. You show me the Black cops who killed George Floyd. Well, okay. So again, the argument is that the cops didn't kill him, but he was in fact having an endorphin rush from dying of a fentanyl overdose, which is backed by state-run autopsies. But again, sake of argument,
that too. I'd be interested in hearing that too.
For the
that's
sake of
fine.
argument, let's
You know what?
say you're right.
I'm not saying to hang someone out to dry for no reason whatsoever, but you know what? What I saw, what he said,
Mhm.
what he was saying on the
Mhm.
ground,
Mhm.
Breonna Taylor, I mean, what about that? There's enough
See
evidence.
again, you need
Here we
context,
go.
because when the headline
Here we
is
go.
innocent Black woman gets shot in her home, and then you realize somebody shot first.
Yeah, they didn't identify themselves. They bust into his apartment. That's what you have guns
There are
for.
multiple.
In
There are
Florida,
multiple.
they
There
would have
are
let him off like they did George. What's his name with Tamir? Not Tamir Rice. With Trayvon
No,
White.
with
They would have
Trayvon
let him
Martin.
off.
Okay, so now we're conflating a bunch of different stuff. So if I could just go one by one. Breonna Taylor, there are multiple eyewitness accounts saying yes, they did identify them.
Actually, there are not. They've all been discounted except for one, which is her next door neighbor, who said, "No,
Okay,
I didn't hear."
but
a
at the
single
same time,
thing."
okay, fine. Sake of argument,
And
I'll
not to
take your
mention
side on
Breonna
this one.
Taylor's boyfriend, who was not a drug dealer, which
Yes,
he's
he
been
was.
portrayed as one.
No, he certainly was. But let's say, sake of argument.
Not then.
Okay,
Not for years.
sake of argument, I'm taking your side on this, right? The police obtained a no-knock warrant.
Yeah,
Now,
they sure did.
judges don't just hand that. Now, if you want to make a case against no-knock warrants for that purpose, fine. This is an excellent precedent to do that. But the fact remains, they obtained a no-knock warrant, and judges don't just hand those out like candy. There has to be so much investigation and so much conclusion that you have to come to before a judge will even do that. That's that one. Now, you want to talk about George Zimmerman.
The woman in Chicago who the cops had a no-knock warrant, bust in, made her stand there naked for 20 minutes while they realized that they were in the wrong apartment. Don't tell me they hand them out like candy.
God, yes.
Don't hand them out like candy. They do hand them out like candy. That's what they do. It's ridiculous.
No, they don't. And now you're comparing different judicial systems between different cities.
I don't care.
You of all people,
I don't care.
You of all people should know Chicago's fucked. But okay, beyond that.
I don't.
The George, you brought up George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. Do you know why he's not in prison right now?
Because he got away with murdering a 17-year-old child.
But do you know why?
17-year-old child.
But do you know why?
Yeah, because a jury of white people let him off. That's why.
Nope, that's wrong. For one, George Zimmerman's not a white guy. He's Spanish. But either way, two, the court of public opinion forced the state attorney to file a charge of murder, premeditated murder. That's impossible to prove. And this is what I fear is going to happen with Derek Chauvin, is that they've bumped him up to second-degree murder, and now that's going to be an easier case for him to beat. Had they charged George Zimmerman with manslaughter, or even, I don't know if Florida recognizes third-degree murder, I could be wrong, but if they had charged him with manslaughter, he would be in prison today. But
you know what? It was murder because he got
and
out
they
of his
pushed it
car.
forward because of the narrative, because of the outcry, because of the outrage. They made it a murder charge, and that is why he is not in prison today.
A 37-year-old man with a gun who is not a police officer stalked a 17-year-old child who was innocently walking home. He just had the bad luck of wearing his hoodie. He was premeditated because he stalked that kid. You don't stalk someone unless you got some nefarious thing in mind. And then when things went against him and he was getting beaten up by the 17-year-old, he shot and killed him. He should be.
Now think about what you just said. It wasn't until he was being beaten by the 17-year-old that he shot him.
What do you think was going to happen? He was stalking him.
But what I'm saying is, if you're out to murder somebody, why would you wait to get to that point? Why wouldn't you just murder them? What sense does that make? I'm going to let him beat me up first because I'm that premeditated.
You stalked me and you lost. I
am playing 4D chess here. If I get him to beat me up first, I get to kill him and I'll get away with it. Come on, Unc. Come on. If they would have charged him with manslaughter, he'd be in prison. The fact is they gave him a charge they couldn't prove and he walked. That is what I fear is going to happen with Derek Chauvin. And I fear with my life the backlash of when that happens, because it started off as third-degree murder, which doesn't involve any premeditation. It doesn't involve any real thought into it. It is essentially a manslaughter charge. Like, okay, fine, you could probably get that, assuming the fentanyl thing is bullshit. Fine, give you that. But you bump it to second-degree murder because of the outcry, because of the riots, because of the outrage. You bump up the charge, and now he's got a much better chance of walking free. That's what I'm saying. You can be angry and you can want the maximum sentence for these people, but if it's not the crime they committed, you're going to lose.
He knelt on that man's neck for 9 minutes until he was dead.
100%.
That is manslaughter. period.
100%.
That is murder. That's what
No,
that
no, no, no,
is.
no. Because see,
We can
words
we
have,
can parse this
Dan,
any way you want to and say, oh,
Dan,
well, this, and he was wearing an orange tie instead of, you can do whatever you want
Dan,
to. Doesn't
words,
make it right, doesn't make it less than murder. It doesn't.
Dan, words have meaning, especially in a legal sense. And you can't say what he did was manslaughter and what he did was murder, because those are two different definitions.
I'm
They're
not a lawyer.
synonymous.
I don't know that. I'm not a lawyer. I'm an artist. I'm not a lawyer.
Okay, well, they're not synonymous. There's a reason
Okay.
they're different charges. It's
Fine.
because of what it takes to make that crime a thing. And it's the same thing with incitement, but we're not even going to go there in this episode. But same thing. It's all about definitions of words is what it comes down to.
This is
Murder of the
insanity.
first or second degree involves premeditation. Manslaughter could be completely accidental, but it still happened and a life was ended because of it, so you will pay the price for it.
Right.
That's
You'll
the
go
difference.
for 5 years and then you'll be fine and you'll get 3 years off for good behavior, and then there, you killed someone.
Assuming you survive
murdered
5 years in
someone, and you
prison.
get 2 years for it. Way to go.
Assuming you survive 5 years in prison as a racist, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, well.
All right, so we are a
We went,
little over an hour and a half, almost 2 hours into this. No,
Yeah.
2.5 hours. Holy shit.
yeah,
started
we've
at
been doing
11.
this for a long time. I know,
Okay,
but I would have
so-
done all of this with you if I could have been there in person in Florida, but we'd have bored the shit out of everybody for 3 hours. So I'm glad we got to do this.
You know what? I really enjoyed this. This might be one of my favorite episodes today. So to wrap this up, on I guess a more agreeing note, because apparently we've come to our moment of clarity in this topic of conversation.
Yes.
I get where you stand and why, and hopefully you at least understand where I'm coming from. Again, taking what I say into good faith and that I'm not just making things up. This is the information I found.
I believe you.
Okay, cool.
I do. And
So-
you know what? Let me just say this. I think that an intelligent, impassioned back and forth is the best remedy to all of people's ills. Plain and simple.
100%. 100%.
So
More
thank you
speech.
for that. I respect every word that came out of your mouth. I truly, truly do. And I respect you as a human being more than you know.
I appreciate that. Not you, obviously. Like I said, you're one of my favorite people ever, even though I don't agree with anything you
I was going to
say.
say.
Uh,
I don't know
but
how
you're
that
hands
happened,
down,
but I don't agree.
hands down one of my all-time favorite people.
Wow.
So to wrap this up, where do you think moving forward the Democratic Party is going? Big picture, like what do you think 2024, assuming Biden's out, where do you think the party goes from here?
I think the Democrats have the most stunning, brilliant ability to shoot themselves in the foot. That I don't think there's a party who does it better. I
Yeah.
just don't. So,
Yeah.
the best I'm hoping for is that we don't get Trumpism again. I hope
Yeah.
he starts his own party, and I hope it's over there, because he'll get 30%, but he won't get more than that. So all I can hope for is that we don't get that again, because I have
Yeah.
very little faith that Democrats are going to do the right thing again.
That would be the worst idea, President Trump, or I guess I call him Don now. That would be the worst idea he could ever have. Yeah, we would essentially never win anything ever again if that were the case.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that, but I hear you.
Yeah. So I think I'm in the same boat. I hope like hell the future of the Republican Party isn't just another Trump run. Even as someone who liked a lot of the policy he put into place. And I won't even dive into specifics, but I did genuinely, I was able to turn my head and just kind of to the shit he said, because I liked some of the stuff he did. I hope like hell it kind of, because I believe what the biggest problem with Trump wasn't what he was saying, it was his delivery, right? So like when Mike Pence did the vice presidential debate, when Mike Pence did the presidential debate, he basically pitched.
We should have ended 5 minutes ago when we were like respecting each other, because we're going to do this all over.
When Mike Pence did the vice presidential debate, he basically pitched the Trump platform, but through the filter of Mike Pence, I thought it was highly palatable. I don't know how you wouldn't want 4 more years of that. But once you put the mic up to Trump and he's not reading a teleprompter, God help us all. Sometimes it's funny. Yeah. Sometimes it's just, so I honestly hope we go, I like the tenacity of Trump. I don't like the language of Trump. If we could get a Nikki Haley, or hell, honestly, I've become a huge fan of Ron DeSantis in this whole pandemic alone, just because of the pandemic. I think Ron DeSantis has some of the tough bravado of, yeah, you're not going to bully me to kowtow in anything, but at the same time, he's reasonable. He's not super overtly, like, out of his way offensive. I think that would be a better way to go.
Yeah. I just don't like Ted Cruz or Lindsey Graham because Trump shit all over them, and they came back and said, "Oh, that's okay, shit on me some more." Their character, the character of those two men is, I don't know,
Well,
the most,
okay.
the most, that's despicable beyond reason to me.
Well, Kamala Harris called Joe Biden a sexual predator and a racist, and she's his vice president. So what does that say about character?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I didn't hear her call him a racist. I heard him say.
Well, in the debate, like we spoke about when she was
Yeah.
talking about
No,
I'm not saying you're racist.
Say, "Are you sorry that you passed that policy? You didn't know any better. Are you sorry that you passed that policy?" That's what I heard her say. So I didn't hear him say you were just a straight up racist. I didn't hear that.
Well, no, she was very careful. She said, "I'm not saying you're a racist, but this thing you did was racist."
Yeah.
And it's like.
Yeah, no.
And then when he had all those allegations,
in my life that I'm not proud of, that could be that certainly could be called racist in my day. I'm certain of that. But I'm not that anymore. I mean, that he did back in the 70s, and he's not that anymore. I accept that. If Donald Trump came forward and said,
I'm all for that too. I'm a fan of, not looking at an isolated incident and saying, well, this person's been racist his whole life, but big picture, it's like even what was his name? Ralph Northam with the picture in the yearbook.
Yeah. The governor of Virginia, sure. The Virginia.
Was that awful? Yeah. Does that mean he's been a racist his whole life? Not necessarily.
Yeah, we should, we could have a whole conversation on cancel culture alone. I probably agree more than you think, but.
Yeah, probably. I think we could do that, but we'll say that for another time. I gotta start getting ready for work.
Wow. All right. Well.
It's been a blast. I've had a great time.
Me too.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is another exciting and just scintillating episode of Across the Aisle. Chaz, for the love of God, come back.
Yes, Chaz, come back. Yeah. Yep. You should come back. Thanks for letting me sit in your chair. This was a blast. I had a great time.
Absolutely. On behalf of Dan Olds, everybody, I'm Justin Collins, and thanks for tuning in.
Seizure.